The courtroom smelled like tobacco and cruelty. Clara Whitlock stood alone before a judge who'd already sold his verdict to the highest bidder. They said her husband's death was an accident, a lie she couldn't prove. Now these vultures wanted her farm, her dignity, everything. You've got 1 hour to choose a husband from this room, Mrs. Whitlock, or we auction your property at sundown. Laughter rippled through the crowd of land-hungry ranchers. Clara's hands shook. Then a voice cut through the noise like a blade. I'll marry her. A stranger stepped forward, dark-eyed, dangerous, and carrying secrets that would get them both killed. If you want to see how a widow nobody believed in became the woman nobody could break, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The Nebraska courthouse sat like a rotten tooth at the edge of town, all gray stone and broken promises. Clara Whitlock climbed the steps with mud still caked on her boots from burying her husband 3 days earlier. The hem of her black dress dragged through the dirt. She didn't bother lifting it. What was the point of dignity when the whole town had already decided she didn't deserve any? Inside, the air pressed down thick with pipe smoke, and the sour smell of unwashed men packed too close together. Every bench was full, ranchers, speculators, men who'd been circling her property like crows over a dying animal even before Thomas hit the ground. They turned to stare when she walked in, their eyes crawling over her in a way that made her skin prickle. Clara kept her chin up. Let them look. Let them whisper about how a woman her size had no business running a farm alone. How Thomas must have worked himself to death carrying the weight she should have managed. She'd heard it all before. Judge Preston Carver sat behind the bench like a toad on a rock, his jowls quivering as he shuffled papers that didn't need shuffling. 58 years old and corrupt since 20. Everyone knew it, nobody could prove it. Mrs. Whitlock. His voice oozed false sympathy. Please approach. Clara walked forward. Her lawyer, if you could call him that, was a nervous kid fresh out of some Eastern school who kept dabbing his forehead with a handkerchief. He'd told her this morning there was nothing he could do. The debts were real. The law was clear. She was alone. Your Honor, the kid stammered, my client requests a postponement to review the claims against her late husband's estate. Denied. Carver didn't even look up. Mrs. Whitlock, you are in arrears on loans totaling $8,342. Your late husband signed promissory notes with half the creditors in this county, and now those notes are due. Do you have the funds to satisfy these debts? Clara's throat tightened. Your Honor, I need time. The spring planting, do you have the funds, yes or no? No, but then this court has no choice but to order the immediate sale of your property to satisfy your husband's obligations. He raised his gavel. Wait! Clara's voice cracked. She hated the sound of it. Desperate, small. That farm has been in my family for 23 years. My father broke that ground. We built everything from nothing. You can't just... I can and I will, unless you can provide alternative means of satisfying the debt. Carver leaned back, his chair creaking. There is, however, one other option available under Territorial Statute 47, Section 12. Clara's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming. She'd heard the rumors. You may enter into a legally binding marriage with a financially solvent male citizen who agrees to assume responsibility for your debts. If you can secure such an arrangement within the next 60 minutes, this court will stay the sale order. The courtroom erupted in laughter. Someone in the back shouted, I'll take her and the farm both. More laughter. Another voice. She ain't worth $8,000, Hank. Don't be stupid. Clara's face burned. She turned and saw them. Rows of grinning faces. Men who'd eaten at her table, whose children had played with her neighbors' kids. Now they were watching her humiliation like it was a Sunday entertainment. The young lawyer touched her elbow. Mrs. Whitlock, you don't have to, Who's interested? Carver cut in, speaking over him. Any man here willing to marry the widow and clear her debts gets a fine piece of bottom land and a house already built. That's more than most of you will ever own. What about livestock? Someone called out. 4 head of cattle, 2 pigs, chickens, Clara whispered. She felt like she was watching herself from somewhere far away. You hear that? 4 cattle. The man who spoke was Luther Baines, who owned the ranch north of hers. He'd been trying to buy her water rights for 5 years. Hell, I'll bid $3,000 and she can work off the rest. The room roared. Carver banged his gavel. This is not an auction, Mr. Baines. Mrs. Whitlock must enter into marriage of her own free will. Those are the terms. Free will. Clara spoke the words like they tasted bad. You're giving me an hour to pick a husband from this room or lose everything my family built. You call that free will? I call it mercy, Mrs. Whitlock. Mercy you don't deserve, considering the crimes your late husband may have been involved in. The courtroom went quiet. Clara's blood turned to ice. What crimes? Her voice came out steady, hard. Thomas ran a farm. He never broke a law in his life. Carver smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Then perhaps you can explain why federal marshals were asking questions about him the week before he died? Why he was seen meeting with known criminals in Omaha? Why he... That's a damned lie. Clara stepped forward. Her lawyer grabbed her arm, but she shook him off. Thomas was a good man. You're making up stories to justify stealing my land. Careful, Mrs. Whitlock. Carver's voice dropped. Accusing an officer of the court of corruption is a serious charge, one that could land you in jail, leaving nobody to care for your property at all. He let that sink in. Now, do you accept the court's terms or not? Clara looked around the courtroom. Every face was hungry, waiting. Even the ones pretending sympathy were calculating what they could gain. 1 hour, she said quietly. 1 hour. Carver checked his pocket watch. It's now 2:45. You have until 3:45 to present a willing husband and proof of his ability to satisfy your debts, or I sign the sale order. Court is in recess. He stood. Everyone else stood. The sound of boots and voices filled the room, men already making deals, placing bets on who'd end up with her. Clara stood frozen in the center of it all. Her lawyer leaned close. Mrs. Whitlock, there are other options. You could contest the debts, claim fraud. With what money? She turned to him. You said yourself I can't win. But this is barbaric. You don't have to humiliate yourself. Too late for that. She looked around. Luther Baines was watching her from across the room, thumbs hooked in his belt. Next to him was Marcus Green, a cattle speculator who'd shown up at her door 2 days after Thomas died with an offer to help. Behind them, more faces, more men who saw her as a problem to solve, a resource to claim. She walked outside. The October air hit her face, cold and clean after the stuffiness inside. Clara stood on the courthouse steps and looked down the street at her wagon, the one Thomas had built with his own hands, the one she'd driven into town this morning thinking she could somehow reason with these people. Stupid. She'd been so stupid. Mrs. Whitlock? She turned. A woman stood at the bottom of the steps. Margaret Hayes, who ran the boarding house on 3rd Street. She was holding a basket covered with a checkered cloth. I brought you something. Margaret climbed up and pressed the basket into Clara's hands. Bread and cheese. Thought you might not have eaten. Clara's throat closed up. She couldn't speak. I know what they're doing in there, Margaret said quietly. I know it ain't right. But honey, if you've got to do this thing, don't pick one of those vultures. Pick someone who won't hurt you more than you're already hurting. I don't know anyone with $8,000 who isn't already circling for my land. Then pick the least worst option and survive. That's all women like us can do. Margaret squeezed her hand. I'm sorry, Clara. I truly am. She left. Clara stood there holding the basket, staring at nothing. The door opened behind her, bootsteps. She didn't turn around. Mrs. Whitlock. It was Baines. I know we've had our disagreements, but I'm prepared to make you a fair offer. Marry me, I'll clear your debts, and you can stay on the property as my wife. You'll want for nothing. Clara turned slowly. Baines was 60 if he was a day, with yellow teeth and hands that had a reputation for being rough with animals and women both. His first wife had left him. The second one died under circumstances nobody talked about. No, Clara said. You might want to reconsider. I'm likely the best option you'll get. I said no. His expression hardened. You think you can do better? Look around, woman. You've got 45 minutes and no prospects. When that time runs out, I'll buy your land at auction for half what it's worth, and you'll be sleeping in a ditch. At least my offer lets you keep a roof over your head. Get away from me. Suit yourself. Baines tipped his hat, mockery in the gesture. But when you're begging on the street, remember I tried to help. He walked away. Clara's hand shook so hard she nearly dropped the basket. The door opened again. This time it was Marcus Green, younger than Baines, better dressed, smiling like they were discussing the weather. Mrs. Whitlock, might I have a word? I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. I'm offering partnership, not charity. He moved closer, lowering his voice. I know about the debts. I also know your land is worth 3 times what they're claiming. Marry me, and I'll not only clear what you owe, I'll invest in expanding the operation. We could triple your yield in 2 years. And what do you get? A wife, a profitable enterprise, a mutually beneficial arrangement. His smile widened. I'm not asking for love, Clara, just cooperation. She wanted to throw the basket in his face. My name is Mrs. Whitlock. For now, he straightened his cuffs. But in 30 minutes, you'll either be Mrs. Green or you'll be homeless. Think carefully about which future you prefer. He left. Clara sagged against the railing. The bread in the basket smelled good. She couldn't imagine eating. More men approached over the next 20 minutes. A shopkeeper who wanted free labor. A farmer who always admired her spirit and figured she'd make a good breeder. A drunk who could barely stand but swore he had money hidden somewhere and he'd find it, just give him a chance. Clara turned them all away. By 3:30, she was alone again. The street had emptied. Everyone was back inside, waiting for the show to end. She looked at the courthouse clock tower. 15 minutes. Maybe she should just let it happen. Let them take the farm. Walk away. Start over somewhere else with nothing. But at least it would be hers, whatever came next. Except she had nowhere to go. No family left. No money for train fare. No skills except farming. And who'd hire a widow with a reputation for being difficult? The door opened one more time. Mrs. Whitlock? Clara didn't turn. I'm not interested. I haven't made an offer yet. Something in the voice made her look. The man standing there wasn't anyone she recognized. Tall, lean, maybe 35, dark hair going gray at the temples, eyes that looked black in the shadow of his hat. He wore trail clothes, dusty and worn but well-maintained. A gun belt sat on his hip, the holster tied down like he knew how to use it. Who are you? Clara asked. Elias Crowe. He didn't offer his hand. I've been listening to the proceedings. Seems like you're in a difficult position. That's one way to put it. I can help. Clara laughed, a harsh sound. Let me guess. You'll marry me, take my farm, and I'll be grateful for your generosity. No. Elias moved closer, his boots quiet on the wood. I'll marry you, clear your debts, and sign the property back into your name. You keep your land. I get a legal claim to stay in the territory without questions. Clara stared at him. Why would you do that? Because I need documentation that holds up to federal scrutiny, and a marriage certificate does that. Because you need someone with cash who won't rob you in your sleep. It's a transaction, Mrs. Whitlock. Nothing more. I don't know you. I don't trust you. You don't have to trust me. You just have to decide if you'd rather take a chance on a stranger or hand your life over to one of those men in there who've already shown you exactly who they are. Clara's hands tightened on the basket. How much cash are you carrying? Enough. He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. $10,000. More than enough to clear what you owe and file the paperwork. Her breath caught. Where did you get that kind of money? Does it matter? Yes. He studied her for a long moment. I used to work for the government. I save my wages. I don't spend much. It was a lie. Clara knew it instinctively, but she also knew the clock was ticking. If I agree to this, she said carefully, what exactly do you expect from me? A roof over my head when I need it. Meals if you're cooking anyway. No questions about where I go or what I do. Beyond that, your life is your own. And if I want you gone, then I leave. But the marriage stays legal for 6 months. After that, we can file for dissolution and you're free. Clara looked at the envelope in his hand. $10,000. More money than she'd seen in her entire life. Why? The question came out as a whisper. Why would you give this to me? You could marry anyone. You could buy land anywhere. Why help someone you don't even know? Something shifted in his expression, too quick to read, gone before she could name it. Let's just say I don't like watching people get backed into corners by men who think power gives them the right to take whatever they want. The courthouse clock began to chime, 3:45. Clara closed her eyes. Thought of her father clearing the land with his bare hands, her mother planting the first garden. Thomas proposing under the cottonwood tree, promising they'd build something good together. All of it about to disappear because the wrong people wanted it. She opened her eyes. If you're lying to me, if you try to take my farm or hurt me, I'll find a way to make you regret it. Elias Crowe smiled, a small, dangerous thing. I believe you. Then yes, I'll marry you. They walked back inside together. The courtroom buzzed with conversation that died the moment Clara appeared with a stranger at her side. Judge Carver looked up, irritation crossing his face. Mrs. Whitlock, your time is... I've found a husband. Clara's voice rang clear across the room. This is Elias Crowe. He's agreed to marry me and assume responsibility for my debts. The room erupted. Baines shot to his feet. Who the hell is this? We don't even know him. Carver banged his gavel. Order, Mr. Crowe, step forward. Elias walked up to the bench, casual and unhurried. He pulled out the envelope and set it down. $10,000 in territorial notes. More than enough to satisfy Mrs. Whitlock's obligations and file the necessary paperwork. Carver opened the envelope. His eyes widened slightly. He recovered quickly, but Clara saw it. The shock, the calculation, the frustration that his plan was falling apart. This is highly irregular, Carver said. I'll need to verify. It's legal tender, Elias said quietly. Verified by the Omaha Bank and Trust, documentation included. Unless you're suggesting the bank is involved in fraud. The implication hung in the air. Carver's jaw tightened. Behind them, Luther Baines was whispering furiously to Marcus Green. Other men were standing, angry voices rising. Furthermore, Elias continued, I'm prepared to marry Mrs. Whitlock immediately and sign an affidavit assuming all financial responsibility for her late husband's debts. Unless Territorial Statute 47, Section 12 has been repealed in the last hour? Carver stared at him. The silence stretched out, taut and dangerous. Finally, the judge spoke. No, the statute stands. He looked at Clara. Mrs. Whitlock, do you enter into this arrangement of your own free will? Clara thought about everything that word meant. Free will. The illusion of choice. The trap dressed up as mercy. Yes. And you, Mr. Crowe? Yes. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Nebraska, I declare you married under Statute 47, Section 12. You'll need to file the official documentation with the county clerk within 48 hours. Carver practically spat the words. This court is adjourned. He slammed the gavel down and walked out through the back door, moving fast. The room erupted again. Clara stood frozen as reality crashed down on her. She'd just married a complete stranger, a man she'd met 20 minutes ago, a man carrying enough cash to make a judge nervous. What had she done? Elias touched her elbow. We should go. Wait. Baines pushed through the crowd, his face red. I want to know where a drifter gets $10,000. That money's probably stolen. Careful, Elias said softly. Accusing someone of theft is a serious charge. I'm just saying it don't add up. Nobody carries that kind of cash unless they're running from something. Or hunting something. Elias's hand drifted toward his gun. Not threatening, just present. Now, if you'll excuse us, my wife and I have business to attend to. My wife. The words made Clara's skin prickle. They walked out together through a gauntlet of staring men. Clara kept her head up, but her heart was hammering. Outside, the October sun was already dropping toward the horizon, throwing long shadows across the street. Where's your wagon? Elias asked. Behind the courthouse. Clara started walking, then stopped. Wait, I need to know something before we go any further. Ask. That money, did you steal it? No. Did you kill someone for it? No. Are you wanted by the law? A pause. Not exactly. Clara's stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means I've done things that would make certain people very interested in my whereabouts. But I'm not a criminal, if that's what you're asking. That's not reassuring. I'm not trying to reassure you. Elias met her eyes. I'm trying to be honest. You want pretty lies, I can give you those. You want the truth, it's going to be complicated. Clara looked at this stranger she'd just married. This man with dark eyes and dangerous hands, and enough money to make a corrupt judge nervous. Every instinct screamed that she'd just traded one trap for another, but the alternative was losing everything. Come on, she said finally. Let's get out of here before they change their minds. They rounded the corner to where Clara's wagon stood. She'd unhitched the horses and tied them to a post. The animals nickered when they saw her. Elias looked at the wagon, then at the gathering darkness. How far is your farm? 12 miles north. We can make it before full dark if we leave now. Then let's move. Clara climbed up onto the seat. Elias swung up beside her. She took the reins, her hands steadier now that she had something to do. The horses pulled forward, the wagon creaking as they headed out of town. They'd gone maybe 3 miles when Elias spoke. Someone's following us. Clara's hands tightened on the reins. How do you know? 2 riders, staying back about half a mile. They've been there since we left town. Could just be travelers. Could be. Elias shifted slightly. But they're not. Clara's mouth went dry. What do we do? Keep driving. Don't speed up. Don't look back. If they get closer, I'll handle it. Handle it how? He didn't answer. Clara kept the horses at a steady pace, her eyes locked on the road ahead. The sun was almost gone now, just a rim of red on the horizon. Shadows pooled in the ditches on either side of the road. 5 miles from town, the riders closed the gap. Clara heard them before she saw them. Hoofbeats coming fast. She risked a glance back and saw 2 shapes silhouetted against the dying light. Elias, I know. When I say so, you're going to stop the wagon and get down. Don't argue. Just do it. The riders were close now. Clara could see their faces. Luther Baines and another man she didn't recognize. Stop the wagon, Baines shouted. Stop right now. Clara's heart hammered. Elias's voice stayed calm. Stop. She pulled the reins. The wagon rolled to a halt. Elias climbed down, positioning himself between Clara and the approaching riders. Baines and his companion reined in 20 feet away. Both men had rifles across their saddles. That was a real nice trick you pulled back there, Baines said. But we've been thinking, that money you showed the judge, it's got to be stolen, probably from a bank robbery up north. You've got no proof of that, Elias said. Don't need proof, just need suspicion. I'm a deputized member of the Territorial Patrol, which means I got authority to detain suspicious persons and investigate potential crimes. Baines grinned. So, here's what's going to happen. You're going to hand over that cash and we're going to escort you back to town for questioning. Mrs. Whitlock can drive herself home, and in the morning we'll sort out whether that wedding was legal or not. Clara climbed down from the wagon. You can't do this. Already doing it, sweetheart. Baines's companion, a hard-faced man with a scar across his cheek, raised his rifle slightly. Now tell your boyfriend to hand over the money before someone gets hurt. Elias stood perfectly still. No. What was that? I said no. The money's been filed with the court. It's no longer in my possession, and you're not a deputy. You're a hired gun doing someone else's dirty work. Baines's smile vanished. You calling me a liar? I'm calling you exactly what you are. The man with the scar lifted his rifle. Clara's breath stopped. Then Elias moved. It happened so fast, Clara barely saw it. One moment he was standing still, the next his gun was out and firing. The crack of the shot split the air. The man with the scar jerked back, his rifle spinning out of his hands. He hit the ground hard. Baines fumbled for his own weapon. Elias had his gun on him before he could clear leather. Don't. Elias's voice was flat, cold. I'm giving you one chance to ride away. Take it. Baines stared at him, face pale. On the ground, his companion was moaning, clutching his shoulder where Elias's bullet had torn through. You shot him, Baines stammered. You can't just... I can, and I did. And unless you want the same, you'll get your friend on his horse and disappear. Tell whoever sent you that the widow is off limits. Tell them if they come after her again, they'll answer to me. Baines looked at Clara, then back at Elias. Whatever he saw in Elias's eyes made his decision. He dismounted, helped his groaning companion up, and got him into the saddle. They rode off without another word, disappearing into the darkness. Clara stood frozen, staring at the spot where they'd been. Elias holstered his gun and turned to her. You all right? You shot him. He was going to shoot us. You could have killed him. I didn't want to kill him. I wanted to make a point. Elias walked back to the wagon. We should keep moving. If they're smart, they won't come back, but smart isn't guaranteed. Clara didn't move. Who are you? I told you, Elias Crowe. No, I mean, who are you really? What kind of man carries $10,000 and shoots people on an empty road like it's nothing? Elias stopped. He looked at her for a long moment, his face unreadable in the gathering dark. The kind who's seen worse things than you can imagine, he said quietly. The kind who knows what men like Baines do when nobody stops them. The kind who's tired of watching good people get destroyed while bad ones profit. He climbed onto the wagon seat. You married me to save your farm. I married you because I needed cover. We both got what we needed. But if you want to back out now, say so. I'll give you the deed paperwork and disappear. Your choice. Clara stood in the dust, her mind spinning. This man, this stranger, had just saved her from losing everything. He'd also just shot someone without hesitation. He was either her salvation or the beginning of something much worse than a courtroom full of vultures. Clara. Her name in his mouth sounded strange. I need an answer. She took a breath. My farm is 12 miles north. We're halfway there. If we turn back now, they'll know you scared, and they'll come harder next time. She climbed onto the wagon beside him. So I guess we keep going, but when we get there, you're going to tell me the truth about who you are and why you really needed to marry me. All of it. All right. Clara took the reins. The horses started forward again, pulling them deeper into the darkness. Behind them, the road stretched empty and quiet. Ahead, her farm waited. The land she'd fought to keep, now shared with a man who could shoot like a professional and lie like he'd been doing it his whole life. What had she gotten herself into? The question followed her all the way home. The farmhouse looked smaller than Clara remembered. Maybe because she was seeing it through a stranger's eyes now, noticing the peeling paint on the shutters, the sagging porch rail Thomas had promised to fix before the snow came, before he died, before everything fell apart. Elias climbed down from the wagon without a word and started unhitching the horses. Clara stood there watching him work, efficient and careful, like he'd done it 1,000 times. The moon was up now, casting everything in silver and shadow. Barn's that way, she said, pointing. There's feed in the bins along the back wall. He nodded and led the horses across the yard. Clara picked up the basket Margaret had given her, the bread and cheese she'd never eaten, and walked to the house. Her hands shook as she unlocked the door. Inside smelled like dust and loneliness. She hadn't been able to clean since Thomas died. Hadn't been able to do much of anything except try to figure out how to survive. Now she'd brought home a husband who shot people. Clara lit the lamp in the kitchen and set the basket on the table. The bread was stale, but she ate it anyway, washing it down with water from the pump. Through the window, she could see lamplight in the barn. Elias was taking his time out there, probably giving her space, or avoiding the conversation she'd demanded. She ate the cheese too. Then she sat in the dark and waited. 20 minutes later, the front door opened. Elias stepped inside, his boots loud on the wood floor. He'd taken off his gun belt and carried it in one hand, casual, like it was a hat or a coat. There's a spare room upstairs, Clara said. Second door on the left. Sheets are in the trunk at the foot of the bed. Thank you. He didn't move toward the stairs. You wanted to talk. I did. I do. Clara stood up, her chair scraping. You promised me the truth. I promised I'd explain why I married you. The rest is more complicated. Then start with the simple part. Elias set the gun belt on the table between them. He pulled out a chair and sat, moving like a man who was used to being tired. In the lamplight, she could see him better. The scar along his jaw, the lines around his eyes that made him look older than 35, the way his hands rested flat on the table, perfectly still. 6 years ago, I worked for the government, he said, Treasury Department. We investigated fraud, corruption, smuggling operations. I was good at it. Maybe too good, because I started finding connections nobody else was seeing. Patterns that went deeper than anyone wanted to admit. What kind of patterns? Territorial officials taking bribes, judges selling verdicts, lawmen protecting criminals in exchange for a cut of the profits. It all connected back to one organization, a network that stretched from Kansas to California, run by a man named Dalton Mercer. Clara's stomach tightened. I've heard that name. Most people have. Mercer presents himself as a legitimate businessman, owns cattle ranches, mining operations, freight companies, but underneath that he controls half the illegal trade west of the Mississippi. Stolen goods, smuggled weapons, protection rackets. He buys politicians and buries anyone who threatens him. And you threatened him. I tried to build a case, gathered evidence, documented transactions, interviewed witnesses. I had enough to bring down his entire operation. Elias's jaw tightened. Then someone in my department leaked everything to Mercer. My witnesses started dying. My evidence disappeared. They tried to make it look like I was the corrupt one, that I'd fabricated the case to cover my own crimes. Did you? No. He met her eyes. I was set up, discredited, forced out of my position before I could defend myself. Since then, I've been moving from town to town, staying ahead of Mercer's people while trying to find proof that could expose him. That's why I needed the marriage certificate. Documentation that looks legitimate, that gives me a reason to be anywhere without raising questions. Clara absorbed this slowly. So when you saw me in that courtroom, I saw an opportunity. You needed money. I needed legal cover. It was supposed to be straightforward. He paused. But there's something else you should know. The way he said it made her skin prickle. What? Your husband, Thomas. He wasn't just a farmer. Clara went cold. What are you talking about? 3 months ago, I was in Omaha tracking one of Mercer's supply routes. I needed someone local who could move freely without suspicion, someone who knew the territory. A contact put me in touch with a farmer from outside town who was willing to help. That farmer was Thomas Whitlock. The room tilted. Clara gripped the edge of the table. No, Thomas never mentioned you, never mentioned any of this, because I told him not to. The less you knew, the safer you were. Elias leaned forward. Thomas agreed to gather information for me. Shipping records, names of Mercer's distributors, anything that could help build a new case. He was careful, smart. For 2 months, everything went perfectly. Until it didn't. Clara's voice came out flat. Until someone figured out what he was doing. They made it look like an accident, a fall from the barn roof while he was repairing shingles. But I know how Mercer's people work. They don't leave loose ends. Clara stood up so fast her chair toppled backward. You got him killed. Yes. The admission hung between them, stark and terrible. You brought him into your war, and he died for it. Clara's hands were shaking. You used him. I didn't force him. He volunteered. Why would he do that? Why would Thomas risk everything? She stopped, thought about the debts, the loans Thomas had taken out that made no sense. The money. That's where it went. He was using it to help you. Elias nodded slowly. Thomas didn't gamble, didn't drink. Those debts they're holding over you, he created them on purpose. He was buying information, paying off Mercer's low-level operators to get access to documents. Every dollar went toward building evidence. And now he's dead and I'm losing the farm anyway. Clara laughed, a broken sound. What a waste. It wasn't a waste. Thomas got me something nobody else could. Something that could destroy Mercer's entire network. What? A coded ledger. 300 pages documenting every transaction, every payment, every corrupt official on Mercer's payroll. Names, dates, amounts. It's all there. Clara stared at him. Where is it? That's the problem. Thomas hid it before they killed him. Somewhere on this property. Somewhere he thought was safe. He sent me a letter saying he had it, but he died before he could tell me where. The pieces clicked together in Clara's head. That's why you're really here, not for cover. You want whatever Thomas hid. I want to finish what he started. What we both started. Elias stood. Those debts they're forcing you to pay? Most of them are to people on Mercer's payroll. They're squeezing you out because they're still looking for what Thomas found. When they couldn't locate it immediately after his death, they decided to take the farm and tear it apart at their leisure. So when you married me, I protected you from being forced off your land while buying myself time to search. Yes. He didn't apologize. But I also kept you from ending up with Luther Baines or someone worse, and I paid your debts with my money, not Thomas's. Clara pressed her palms against her temples. Too much. It was all too much. I need to think. Take your time, but Clara... He waited until she looked at him. Those men who followed us tonight? That's just the beginning. Mercer knows someone was asking questions in town about your husband. When he finds out I married you, he'll put the pieces together. They'll come. Let them come. I'll tell them I don't know anything about any ledger because I don't. You think that'll stop them? Elias shook his head. They'll tear this place apart, and if they decide you're not useful, they'll make you disappear just like Thomas. Clara's throat closed up. She wanted to scream at him, throw him out, pretend none of this was real. Instead, she heard herself ask, "What do we do?" "We find the ledger before they do, and then we use it to burn Mercer's operation to the ground." She should have said no, should have told him to take his war and his dead husband and get out of her house. But something in his voice caught her. The exhaustion, the anger, the same helplessness she'd felt standing in that courtroom. "You loved him," Elias said quietly. "Thomas, I could tell from how he talked about you. He did this to protect you, to give you a chance at a life that wasn't under Mercer's thumb. Don't let that be for nothing." Clara looked around the kitchen, the table where she and Thomas had eaten breakfast every morning for 7 years, the window where she'd watched him walk to the barn, the floor he'd carried her across on their wedding day, all of it built on secrets and lies. "Where do we start?" she asked. They started in the barn. Elias brought 3 lanterns and they worked their way through every stall, every storage bin, every loose board. Clara had been in this building 1,000 times, but she looked at it differently now, seeing it as a hiding place, somewhere Thomas might have tucked away something dangerous. He was methodical, Elias said, running his hands along the wall beams. Wouldn't have chosen anywhere obvious, somewhere he could access without drawing attention. "The hayloft," Clara pointed up. "He went up there almost every day to throw down feed. Nobody would have questioned it." They climbed the ladder. The loft was cramped and dusty, filled with hay bales stacked to the rafters. They moved methodically, checking behind each bale, feeling for loose floorboards. Nothing. 2 hours later, they'd searched the entire barn. Clara's dress was filthy, and her hands were scraped raw. Elias looked just as frustrated. "Could he have buried it?" Clara asked. "Somewhere outside?" "Possible, but that would have been riskier. Harder to check on regularly, easier for someone else to stumble across." Elias leaned against a support post. "Think about his routine. What did Thomas do every single day that wouldn't have seemed strange?" Clara thought. "He fed the animals, checked the fences, fixed things." "Fixed things where?" "Everywhere. The house, the barn, the equipment." She stopped. "The workshop." Thomas's workshop was a small shed behind the house, barely 10 feet square. He'd built it himself when they first moved here, spent hours in there repairing tools and building furniture. Clara had always given him space out there, figured he needed somewhere to think. She hadn't been inside since he died. The door stuck when she pulled it. Elias helped her force it open, and they stepped into darkness that smelled like sawdust and rust. The lantern light revealed a workbench covered in tools, half-finished projects collecting dust, Thomas's spare coat hanging on a nail by the door. Clara touched the coat. Her throat ached. "I'll search high, you search low," Elias said gently. They worked in silence. Clara went through the drawers beneath the workbench. Nails, screws, bits of hardware. Nothing unusual. Elias checked the rafters, the walls, even pulled up the floorboards in one corner. "Wait." Clara had opened a drawer that stuck halfway. She yanked harder and it came free, revealing a false bottom. Underneath was a metal box, 12 inches square, locked. Elias moved beside her. "That it?" "I don't know. I've never seen it before." Clara lifted the box out. It was heavy. "Do you have the key?" "No. Thomas never sent one." Elias examined the lock. "I can break it, but that'll be loud. You have a file?" Clara found one hanging on the wall. Elias took it and started working on the lock mechanism, careful and precise. It took 20 minutes, but finally something clicked. The lid popped open. Inside was a leather journal, its pages covered in tiny handwriting and columns of numbers. Underneath that was a stack of papers. Shipping manifests, financial records, letters. All of it organized with Thomas's careful attention to detail. Clara lifted out the journal and opened it. The first page had Thomas's handwriting. "If you're reading this, something's happened to me. Elias, finish it. Clara, I'm sorry. I love you." Her vision blurred. She set the journal down and walked out of the shed, into the cold night air where she could breathe. Elias followed her. He didn't speak, just stood there while she cried silently, her shoulders shaking. "He knew," Clara finally said. "He knew they might kill him, and he did it anyway. He did it for you."
I didn't want him to die for me. I wanted him to live. She turned on Elias, angry now. You should have told him how dangerous it was. You should have. I did tell him. He chose to help anyway. Elias's voice was rough. I know that doesn't make it hurt less. I know you hate me for it, but Thomas made his choice knowing the risks. Don't take that away from him. Clara wiped her eyes with her sleeve. What now? Now we read everything in that box, figure out what Thomas found, and we prepare for what's coming.
They carried the box into the house and spent the rest of the night going through it. The journal was a masterpiece of documentation. 3 months of surveillance notes, transaction records, names and dates and locations. Thomas had tracked Mercer's operation with the precision of a trained investigator. He was good at this, Elias said, halfway through. Better than some agents I worked with. Clara read over his shoulder. He always paid attention to details. Could look at a field and tell you which crops would fail before planting. I guess he turned that skill to something else. The papers underneath were even more damning. Shipping manifests showing illegal weapons being moved through legitimate freight companies. Letters between Mercer and territorial officials discussing bribes. Financial records proving judges and sheriffs were on his payroll. This is enough, Elias said quietly. With this, we can dismantle his entire network. Federal marshals can't ignore evidence this detailed. So why did Thomas hide it instead of turning it in? Because he didn't know who to trust. Mercer has people everywhere. Thomas needed to get it to someone outside the corrupted chain of command. Elias looked at Clara. He was waiting for me to come back through town. We had a plan to hand everything over to a federal prosecutor in Denver, someone I knew was clean. Then they killed him. Can we still do that? Go to Denver. Eventually, but first we need to protect you. Once Mercer realizes we have this, he'll send everything he's got to get it back. As if summoned by the words, gunshots split the night. Clara jerked upright. Elias was already moving, grabbing his gun belt from the table, blowing out the lamp. The house plunged into darkness. Stay down, he hissed. More gunshots. Closer now. Clara heard horses, men shouting. She crawled to the window and risked a look outside. Torches lit the yard. At least 6 riders, maybe more. One of them was Luther Baines. They're here for the ledger, Elias said. They must have watched us all night, waited until we found it. What do we do? You go out the back with the box. There's a ravine a quarter-mile north. Remember it? Clara nodded. Thomas had shown it to her once, a deep cut in the earth where a creek ran. Hide there. Don't come back until daylight or until I come get you. If I don't come by dawn, take the box and run. What about you? I'll buy you time. Elias checked his revolver, then moved toward the front door. Go, now. Clara grabbed the metal box and ran for the back of the house. Behind her, she heard the front door crash open, heard Elias's gun bark twice. She didn't look back. Out the back door, across the dark yard, stumbling over rocks and roots. Her dress caught on a fence post and tore. She kept running. Behind her, the farmhouse erupted in gunfire. Men were shooting, cursing. Something exploded. One of the lanterns, maybe, setting fire to the dry wood. Clara ran harder. She found the ravine by nearly falling into it. Slid down the steep bank, scraping her hands and knees, landing hard at the bottom where the creek ran thin and cold. She pressed herself against the bank and held the box to her chest, trying to breathe quietly. The gunfire continued for what felt like hours but was probably minutes. Then silence fell, heavy and terrible. Clara waited, shivering, listening for footsteps that meant they'd found her. Instead, she heard horses leaving, voices fading, eventually nothing but wind and the creek's soft murmur. She stayed hidden until her legs cramped, until the sky started to gray in the east. Then she climbed out of the ravine and walked back toward what had been her home. The farmhouse was still standing, but barely. The porch had collapsed. Windows were shot out. Smoke drifted from holes in the roof where fire had started and died. The barn looked intact, but the workshop was gone, just splinters and ash. Clara approached slowly, expecting ambush. Instead, she found stillness. Bodies in the yard. 3 men she didn't recognize, all dead. Luther Baines wasn't among them. She found Elias sitting against the water pump, his left arm bleeding through a makeshift bandage. His gun was still in his hand. He looked up when she approached, relief crossing his face. "You're alive," he said. "So are you." Clara knelt beside him. How bad is it? Bullet grazed me. I've had worse. He tried to stand and winced. They get the box? I have it. She showed him. She keeds. Good. That's good. He took a breath. Baines got away. He'll report back to Mercer. They'll know we have the ledger now. Then we need to leave. Can't travel like this. I'd slow you down. Elias looked at the ruined house. I'm sorry. I know what this place meant to you. Clara looked around at the destruction. The home she'd fought so hard to keep was a burned-out shell. The farm her father had built from nothing was a battlefield. Everything Thomas had died for was reduced to violence and ash. It's just wood, she heard herself say. It's not what I was fighting for anyway. What were you fighting for? Clara met his eyes. The right to choose. To not be broken by people who think they can take whatever they want. She stood up, still holding the box. Thomas tried to stop them, and they killed him for it. I won't let that be the end of it. You don't have to do this. I can get you somewhere safe. There is no safe. Not anymore. Clara looked at the journal in the box, at Thomas's careful handwriting. You said this evidence could bring down Mercer's operation. Yes. Then that's what we're going to do. Not because you need me to, because they need to pay for what they took from me. Elias studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. All right, but we need supplies first. Medical kit, ammunition, horses that haven't been run to death. Can you manage that? There's a town 15 miles west, small place, but they have a doctor and a general store. We can get what we need. Then help me up. Clara pulled him to his feet. He was heavier than he looked, solid muscle and stubborn will. They made it to the barn where the horses had somehow survived the attack, nervous but unharmed. It took them 2 hours to get ready. Clara packed what she could salvage from the house, clothes, food, Thomas's journal. She found her father's old rifle in the wreckage and cleaned it, loading it with hands that only shook a little. Elias watched her work. You know how to use that? My father taught me. Said a woman alone needed to know how to protect herself. Clara tested the rifle's weight. Guess he was right. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, leaving the farm behind. Clara didn't look back. If she did, she'd fall apart, and she couldn't afford that now. The town Elias mentioned was called Millbrook. Barely 30 buildings clustered around a crossroads. They hitched the horses outside a doctor's office, and Clara went in first while Elias waited, too conspicuous with blood on his sleeve. The doctor was an old man with kind eyes and hands that didn't shake. He looked at Elias's arm, cleaned the wound, and stitched it closed without asking questions Clara couldn't answer. You folks in some kind of trouble? He asked finally. The less you know, the safer you are, Elias said. The doctor nodded like he'd expected that answer. There's a boarding house down the street. Mrs. Chen runs it. She doesn't talk much, and she doesn't remember faces. Might be a good place to rest. Thank you, Clara said. They paid him and left. The boarding house was exactly as described, clean, quiet, and run by a woman who took their money and showed them to a room without asking their names. Clara collapsed on the bed as soon as the door closed. Every part of her ached. Her hands were blistered from the rains, her dress was torn and filthy, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd slept. Rest, Elias said. I'll keep watch. You need rest too. I've gone longer without. He sat by the window, his gun in his lap. Sleep, Clara. You've earned it. You've earned... She wanted to argue, but exhaustion dragged her down. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was Elias silhouetted against the window, watching the street below like he expected the world to come for them at any moment. Maybe he was right. Clara dreamed of Thomas. They were standing in the workshop, and he was trying to tell her something important. But every time he opened his mouth, gunshots rang out, and she woke up gasping. Elias was still at the window. The light had changed. Late afternoon now. How long was I asleep? Clara asked. 5 hours. How do you feel? Like I fell off a mountain. She sat up slowly. Any trouble? Nothing yet. But there's something you should see. He handed her a newspaper. Picked it up while you were sleeping. The headline made her stomach drop. Widow's farm attacked by unknown assailants. The article was short, filled with speculation and lies. It claimed Clara and her new husband had been involved in criminal activities. that the attack was retaliation from a rival gang. No mention of Mercer. No mention of corruption. Just a story designed to make her look guilty. They're controlling the narrative, Elias said, making it look like we're the criminals. If we try to go to the authorities now, we'll be arrested on sight. So what do? We bypass local law enforcement entirely. There's a federal marshal based in Lincoln, a man named Samuel Cooper. I worked with him years ago. He's honest, and he hates Mercer as much as I do. If we can get to him with this evidence, he'll act. Lincoln's 3 days ride, 4 if we're careful, and we need to be careful. Mercer will have people watching the main roads. Elias folded the newspaper. Are you sure about this? Once we commit, there's no going back. Clara thought about Thomas's last words in the journal, about standing in that courtroom, powerless and humiliated, about watching her home burn while men with guns decided her future. I'm sure, she said. They left Millbrook at dusk when the streets were empty and watchful eyes were fewer. Elias had bought supplies, ammunition, dried food, bedrolls. Clara wore pants she'd bought from the general store, easier to ride in than her torn dress. She'd cut her hair short too, impulsively, with the doctor's scissors. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Good. Let them look for a frightened widow. They wouldn't find her. They rode through the night, staying off main trails, cutting across open country where the grass grew tall and the horizon stretched endless. Nebraska was beautiful in the moonlight. Rolling hills and dark sky, silent except for wind and the sound of their horses breathing. Tell me about Samuel Cooper, Clara said after hours of quiet. He's old school, fought in the war, came west to bring order to the territories. He doesn't care about politics or who has money. He cares about the law. Elias shifted in his saddle. He's also the man who hired me at Treasury, trained me himself. When I was forced out, he tried to fight it but didn't have the authority. Last I heard, he was still working cases in Nebraska. You trust him? With my life. A pause. And yours. They rode in silence for a while longer. Clara's thoughts drifted to Thomas, to their life together. How much of it had been real and how much had been him carrying secrets he couldn't share. She wanted to be angry at him for hiding everything. Instead, she just felt tired. Can I ask you something? Elias said. Go ahead. Why did you stay? After I told you about Thomas, about what I'd gotten him into. You could have told me to leave. Why didn't you? Clara considered the question. Because staying meant choosing. And I'm tired of having choices taken from me. She looked at him. Also because I think Thomas wouldn't have helped you if he didn't believe it mattered. He was a good judge of people. If he trusted you, maybe I can too. He was wrong to trust me. I got him killed. You didn't pull the trigger. Might as well have.
Stop it. Clara's voice came out sharp. Thomas made his choice. You said so yourself. Don't dishonor that by making it about your guilt. He saw something in you worth dying for. Either prove him right or prove him wrong, but don't stand in the middle feeling sorry for yourself. Elias looked at her, something shifting in his expression. You're tougher than you look. I have to be. The world doesn't give women like me the luxury of being soft. They camped before dawn in a grove of cottonwoods beside a dry creek bed. Elias took first watch while Clara tried to sleep, wrapped in her bedroll, staring up at stars that seemed too bright and too distant. Somewhere out there, Dalton Mercer was mobilizing his people, spreading lies, hunting for 2 fugitives who had something he couldn't afford to lose. Clara should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something else, a cold clarity, like ice forming over deep water. They'd taken everything from her, her husband, her home, her name. Now she was going to take everything from them. They never made it to Lincoln. The ambush came on the second day, in a stretch of empty grassland where the road cut through a shallow valley. Clara saw the riders first, 3 of them cresting the ridge to the east, silhouetted against the morning sun. She touched Elias's arm and pointed. He didn't waste time asking questions. Ride. They kicked their horses into a gallop, heading west toward a line of trees maybe 2 miles distant. Behind them, the riders gave chase. Clara could hear them now, their horses pounding closer. She leaned low over her saddle, willing her mount to go faster, but the animal was tired from 2 days of hard travel. A rifle shot cracked the air. The bullet hit dirt 10 feet to Clara's left. They're not trying to kill us yet, Elias shouted over the wind.
They want us alive. That's supposed to be reassuring? Another shot, closer this time. Clara's horse stumbled and she nearly went flying. The trees were still a mile off, too far. They weren't going to make it. Elias must have reached the same conclusion because he suddenly veered right toward a cluster of rocks jutting up from the prairie like broken teeth. There, we make a stand. They reached the rocks and dismounted fast, dragging their rifles and the metal box with them. The horses bolted, heading for the trees on their own. Clara pressed herself against stones still cool from the night and tried to catch her breath. The three riders slowed their approach, spreading out, smart, not giving Clara and Elias a single target. 2 men and a woman, all armed, all moving with the confidence of people who'd done this before. "You've got nowhere to go," one of the men shouted. He was young, maybe 25, with a scar running down his neck. "Mr. Mercer just wants to talk. Nobody has to get hurt." "That's a lie and you know it," Elias called back. "Maybe, but you're outgunned and outnumbered and reinforcements are coming. You can die here today or you can hand over what you stole and walk away." Clara looked at Elias. "How many bullets do you have?" 12 in the rifle, 6 in the revolver. "I've got 8. She checked her father's rifle, hands steadier than she expected. "Not enough if reinforcements are really coming." "Then we need to make them count." Elias peered around the rock. The woman circling left, trying to get an angle on us. Clara shifted position, bringing her rifle up. She'd never shot at a person before, never even thought about it. But these people had burned her home and hunted her across half of Nebraska, and they weren't going to stop. The woman made her move, darting from one patch of cover to another. Clara tracked her movement, finger on the trigger. She fired. The recoil slammed into her shoulder and the shot went wide, kicking up dust 3 feet from where the woman dove behind a rise in the ground. "Too high," Elias said. "Aim lower than you think." The scarred man fired back, bullets sparking off the rocks above their heads. Clara ducked, her heart hammering. This was insane. She was a farmer's widow hiding behind stones while killers tried to murder her for a journal she'd never asked to inherit. "We need a new plan," she said. "I'm open to suggestions." Clara looked around. The rocks provided decent cover, but they were trapped. No way forward, no way back. Unless the ravine, she said suddenly. "Behind us, maybe 50 yards. I saw it when we rode in." Elias risked a glance. "That's a long run under fire." "You have a better idea?" He didn't. They waited for the next exchange of gunfire, then ran. Clara grabbed the metal box and sprinted, her boots slipping on loose stone. Behind her, someone shouted. Rifles cracked. A bullet whined past her ear, so close she felt the air split. She kept running, legs burning, lungs screaming. The ravine opened up in front of her, a gash in the earth maybe 15 feet deep with steep sides. No time to think. She jumped. The landing knocked the wind out of her. She rolled hard, pain shooting through her ribs, the metal box flying from her hands. Above, Elias fired twice, then followed her down. He hit the slope and slid, barely staying upright. "You hurt?" he asked. "I'll live." Clara crawled to where the box had landed and grabbed it. "Now what?" "Now we move before they circle around." The ravine ran north-south, cutting through the prairie like a wound. They followed it south, half running, half stumbling over rocks and roots. Behind them, voices echoed. Their pursuers had reached the edge. "They're coming down!" the woman's voice carried. "Split up and flush them out." The ravine forked ahead. Elias took the western branch without hesitating, pulling Clara with him. This channel was narrower, barely wide enough for them to move single file. Overhead, the walls closed in, blocking out the sky. They ran for what felt like hours but was probably minutes. The ravine twisted and turned, sometimes opening into small clearings, sometimes narrowing to gaps they had to squeeze through sideways. Clara's dress, the pants she'd bought, tore on thorns. Her hands were bleeding from catching herself on sharp rocks. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew fainter. Either they'd lost their trackers or this was a trap. The ravine dead-ended at a wall of collapsed earth and tangled roots. Clara stared at it, despair rising. "We're stuck." Elias examined the wall, then the sides of the ravine. "We can climb. There's enough handholds." "With them right behind us? You want to stay here and wait for them to catch up?" Clara looked at the box in her hands. Thomas's journal. 300 pages of evidence that could destroy the people who'd destroyed her life. She thought about letting it go, leaving it buried in this forgotten cut in the earth. Maybe then they'd stop hunting her. Then she thought about Thomas's handwriting. Elias, finish it. Clara, I'm sorry. I love you. I'll climb, she said. Elias went first, testing the route, finding the strongest roots and rocks. Clara followed, the metal box strapped to her back with her belt. Every grip felt precarious. Twice she slipped, her boots scrabbling for purchase. Elias caught her hand and pulled her up. They were halfway to the top when gunfire exploded below. Clara looked down and saw the scarred man at the base of the ravine, his rifle raised. He fired again, and the bullet hit stone inches from her foot. She jerked back, lost her grip, and started to fall. Elias grabbed her wrist. I've got you! He hauled her up with strength that shouldn't have been possible with an injured arm. They scrambled the last few feet and rolled onto flat ground, gasping. But there was no time to rest. The other two pursuers were already visible, running across the prairie toward them. And in the distance, Clara saw more riders, 6, maybe 7, all heading their way. The reinforcements, Elias said grimly. He pulled her to her feet. We need a horse and a miracle. They ran again. Clara's legs felt like lead, but she forced them to keep moving. The land here was broken. Scattered rocks, patches of scrub brush, small rises that offered momentary cover. They used it all, zigzagging, trying to stay unpredictable. A shot from behind. Another. Clara heard one of the riders shout orders, coordinating the hunt. They were being herded, she realized, driven toward something. Elias, I know, keep moving. They crested a low hill and Clara saw what their pursuers had been driving them toward. A ranch house sat in a shallow valley ahead, surrounded by fenced pastures and outbuildings. Horses grazed in a corral. Smoke rose from the chimney. We can't lead them to innocent people, Clara said. That's not a working ranch. Elias pointed. Look at the fences, new construction, guard posts disguised as lookout towers. That's one of Mercer's properties. Clara's stomach sank. We just ran straight into his arms. Maybe. Or maybe we found the one place they won't expect us to go. Elias pulled out Thomas's journal and shoved it inside his coat. If we get separated, you run. Don't wait for me. Get this evidence to Samuel Cooper and Lincoln. Promise me. Elias, promise me, Clara. She nodded, unable to speak. They approached the ranch from the west, using a dry stream bed for cover. The gunfire had stopped. Either their pursuers had lost sight of them, or they were waiting to see what Clara and Elias would do next. Up close, the ranch looked even less legitimate. The barn was too large for the number of animals visible. The house had shuttered windows and reinforced doors. Men moved between buildings with the casual alertness of guards on patrol. How many? Clara whispered. At least 10, probably more inside. Elias studied the layout. The barn. If we can reach it, we might find a way through to the other side. That's a terrible plan. You have a better one? She didn't. They waited for the nearest guard to walk past, then sprinted for the barn. Clara's boots hit hard-packed earth with dull thuds that sounded impossibly loud. 50 feet, 30, 20. The barn door stood open just enough to slip through. They dove inside and pressed themselves against the wall, breathing hard. Inside, the barn smelled like hay and horses and something else. Gunpowder, oil, chemicals. Clara's eyes adjusted to the dimness and she saw why. Crates lined the walls, stamped with military markings. Rifles stood in racks. Ammunition boxes were stacked to the ceiling. This is an armory, she breathed. One of many. Elias moved deeper into the barn, checking for exits. Mercer has stockpiles like this all over the territory. Weapons he smuggles and sells to whoever pays. Clara thought about Thomas's journal, the shipping manifests he'd documented. This must have been one of the locations he'd tracked. He'd stood right here, maybe, counting crates and noting numbers that would later help destroy this operation. A door at the back of the barn led to a fenced yard. Beyond that, open country stretched toward a line of trees. If they could reach those trees... There you are. Clara spun around. A man stood in the barn entrance, backlit by afternoon sun. Not one of the riders who'd chased them. Someone new, older, maybe 50, dressed in expensive clothes gone dusty from travel. His face was lean and hard, with eyes that calculated everything. Clara knew who he was before Elias said his name. Mercer. Mr. Crowe? Dalton Mercer stepped inside, flanked by 4 armed men. You've led me on quite a chase. I'm almost impressed. His eyes shifted to Clara. And you must be the widow, Thomas's wife. You look different from the description I received. The hair is new. Clara's hand drifted toward her rifle. One of Mercer's men raised his weapon in response. I wouldn't, Mercer said mildly. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Again. It's becoming a pattern with you two. He walked closer, his boots clicking on the barn floor. Now, I believe you have something that belongs to me. The evidence belongs to the federal government, Elias said, and to everyone your organization has robbed, threatened, or killed. Evidence? Mercer smiled. Such a weighted word. Evidence requires context, corroboration, chain of custody. A journal full of numbers and names, that's just paper. And paper burns. Not before copies reach the right hands. Copies. Mercer's smile widened. You're bluffing. If you'd made copies, you wouldn't be running for your life across Nebraska. You'd be safe somewhere while the law did your dirty work. He held out his hand. Give me the journal, Mr. Crowe, and I'll let you both walk away. You have my word. Your word means nothing. Perhaps, but consider your alternative. I have 20 men surrounding this property. You have, 18 bullets between you? The mathematics are unfavorable. Mercer's tone stayed conversational, like they were discussing crop prices. I don't want to kill you. Dead martyrs create problems. I'd much rather we come to an understanding. You give me what I want. I give you money and safe passage. Everyone wins. Clara found her voice. You killed my husband. Mercer's eyes shifted to her. Thomas Whitlock made unfortunate choices. He involved himself in matters beyond his understanding. That's not on me. You murdered him. I gave an order and competent people carried it out. There's a difference. Mercer spoke like he was explaining something obvious. Your husband was warned multiple times. He chose to continue his actions. The consequences were his own making. Rage blazed through Clara, hot and consuming. Before she could think, before Elias could stop her, she raised her rifle and fired. The shot went wild. Her hands were shaking too hard, her aim compromised by fury. The bullet hit a crate behind Mercer, sending splinters flying. His men immediately opened fire. Elias grabbed Clara and threw her behind a stack of ammunition boxes as bullets tore through the air where she'd been standing. He returned fire, 2 quick shots that sent Mercer's men diving for cover. The back door! Elias shouted. Go! Clara ran, bent low, her ears ringing from gunfire. Behind her, Elias was shooting, buying her seconds. She hit the back door hard and it flew open. Outside, the fenced yard, the trees beyond. She was halfway across the yard when she realized Elias wasn't behind her. Clara stopped, turned back. Through the open barn door, she could see chaos. Men shooting, muzzle flashes, smoke. Elias was pinned behind the ammunition boxes, trapped. She should have kept running, should have followed his orders and escaped. Instead, she found herself moving back toward the barn, her rifle raised. One of Mercer's men came through the door and Clara shot him without thinking. He went down hard, clutching his leg. She fired again, forcing another guard to take cover, then ran into the barn. What are you doing? Elias shouted over the noise. Saving you, apparently. Clara grabbed his arm. Move! They ran together, firing as they went. One of the crates exploded. Someone had hit the ammunition. The blast was deafening, shaking the barn's frame. Fire spread fast, catching on hay and wood. Clara and Elias burst out the back door into smoke and confusion. Men were shouting, running. The barn was burning now, flames eating through the structure. They sprinted for the fence, climbed it, kept running. Behind them, the barn's roof collapsed with a sound like thunder. Someone was screaming orders. Horses whinnied in panic. They reached the trees and didn't stop. Ran until Clara's lungs burned and her legs gave out. She collapsed against a cottonwood, gasping. That was stupid, Elias said, but he didn't sound angry. You should have left me. Probably. Clara looked at her hands. They were shaking violently now, the adrenaline wearing off. I shot someone. I know. I've never done that before. Shot a person. First time's always the hardest. Elias checked behind them, listening. We need to keep moving. They'll regroup and come after us. Let them come. I'm tired of running. Clara's voice came out flat. We can't make it to Lincoln. We can't fight them. We can't hide. So what do we do? Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, We go on offense. What does that mean? It means we stop trying to get away from Mercer and start taking the fight to him. We use what Thomas found to hit his operations one by one, cut off his money, destroy his supply lines, turn his people against him. Elias pulled out the journal. This lists every location, every corrupt official, every weak point in his network. We exploit them. That's a suicide mission.
Maybe, but it's better than waiting for him to corner us again.
He looked at her.
I'm not asking you to come. You've done enough. I can get you somewhere safe. There is no safe, Clara cut him off. You said that yourself. And I'm done hiding. She pushed herself upright. Thomas died gathering this information. I'm not going to let his death mean nothing. This isn't going to be clean. People will get hurt. Good. They've hurt enough people already. Time someone hurt them back.
Something shifted in Elias's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. All right, but we do this smart, strategic. We pick targets that cause maximum damage with minimum exposure. Where do we start? Elias opened the journal and flipped through pages. Thomas documented a shipment route through a town called Ridgeway, 40 miles west. Mercer moves stolen goods through there every month, protected by the local sheriff who's on his payroll. If we intercept the next shipment and expose the sheriff, we cut off one of his major supply lines. When's the next shipment? According to this, 5 days from now. Clara nodded. Then we have 5 days to prepare. They traveled west through country that grew increasingly rough. Rolling grassland gave way to broken hills and deep ravines. They avoided towns, avoided roads, stole supplies from isolated homesteads when they had to. Clara hated the stealing, but Elias insisted they couldn't risk being seen. Right now, Mercer thinks we're desperate and running, he explained. If we show up in a town making purchases, word gets back to him. We lose our advantage. So they became ghosts. Moving at night, sleeping in caves and abandoned shacks, eating jerky and hardtack, drinking from streams. Clara's clothes were ruined, her hands calloused and scarred. She barely recognized herself when she caught her reflection in a creek. On the third day, they found a spot overlooking Ridgeway. The town was small, maybe 200 people, clustered around a main street with a church at one end and a saloon at the other. The sheriff's office sat right in the middle, a small brick building with barred windows. The shipment comes through at night, Elias said, studying the layout through a spyglass he'd acquired somewhere. 4 wagons, 6 guards, headed for a warehouse on the east side of town. The sheriff meets them personally to ensure safe passage. What's in the wagons? According to Thomas's notes, stolen mining equipment, copper wire, tools, explosives. Mercer's people steal it from legitimate operations and sell it to buyers in Colorado. So we just take the wagons? Not exactly. Elias lowered the spyglass. We let them reach the warehouse. Then we set a fire. When they respond, we take evidence proving the sheriff's involvement and leave it somewhere federal authorities will find it. That's your plan? Arson and theft? You have a better idea? Clara thought about it. Yes, actually. We don't just burn the warehouse. We let the townspeople see what's inside first. Make it public. Force everyone to witness what their sheriff's protecting. Elias looked at her with something like admiration. That's ruthless. I learned from the best. They spent the next 2 days preparing, scouting routes, timing guard patrols, identifying weaknesses in Mercer's operation. Clara learned to move silently, to watch without being seen. Elias taught her tricks he'd learned as an investigator. How to read body language, how to predict behavior, how to exploit overconfidence. On the night of the shipment, they were ready. The wagons rolled into Ridgeway just after midnight, exactly as Thomas's journal predicted. Clara and Elias watched from the roof of a feed store across from the warehouse. Below, Sheriff Garrett, a fat man with a badge and a conscience for sale, met the convoy personally. Right on schedule, one of the drivers said. Any problems? Garrett asked. Clean run. Nobody followed us. They unloaded the wagons into the warehouse. Clara counted 6 guards, all armed, all relaxed. They thought they were safe here, protected by corruption and distance. They were wrong. Clara and Elias waited until the wagons were empty and the guards were inside, sharing whiskey and laughing about something. Then Elias dropped down from the roof and placed charges he'd made from stolen blasting powder at strategic points around the building. 5 minutes, he whispered when he returned. Then this place lights up. They moved to the church bell tower.
Clara had broken the lock earlier and they climbed the stairs in darkness. From the top, they had a clear view of the entire town. The explosion wasn't huge. Elias had calibrated it carefully, just enough to blow out the warehouse doors and start a fire that would spread. The blast echoed through the night, and within seconds, people were running outside in nightclothes, shouting. The warehouse burned bright, illuminating the stolen equipment inside. Mining tools, crates of explosives, everything visible to everyone. Sheriff Garrett tried to keep people back, but someone, Clara couldn't see who, pushed past him and saw what was inside. The word spread like the fire. Stolen goods. The sheriff's involved. Mercer's operation. Now, Elias said. They climbed down from the bell tower and slipped through the chaos to the sheriff's office. Elias picked the lock in seconds. Inside, they found what Thomas's journal had told them to look for. Ledgers documenting payoffs, correspondence with Mercer's organization, proof of the sheriff's complicity. Clara gathered it all into a satchel while Elias kept watch. Then they left everything in the middle of the town square, where federal marshals would find it when they inevitably came to investigate the explosion. They were half a mile outside town when Clara finally spoke. "Do you think it worked?" "Garrett's finished. His credibility is destroyed, and when the marshals see that evidence, he'll be arrested. Mercer loses his protection in Ridgeway and his supply route. One down." Clara looked back at the glow on the horizon. "How many more?" According to the journal, 43 locations, 18 corrupt officials, dozens of operations. "Then we'd better get started." Over the next 2 weeks, they became a plague on Mercer's empire. They hit a smuggling operation in Cedar Falls, destroying 3 warehouses full of stolen weapons. They exposed a judge in Fairbury who was taking bribes, leaving evidence where the newspapers would find it. They sabotaged a lumber mill in Hastings that was a front for money laundering. Every attack was surgical. They never killed anyone, never hurt civilians. But they cost Mercer millions and made him look weak, vulnerable. And with every strike, Clara felt something growing inside her. Not quite satisfaction, but something colder. A sense of purpose built on calculated destruction. She was good at this, she realized. Good at seeing patterns, anticipating moves, striking where it hurt most. Maybe Thomas had seen that in her. Maybe that's why he'd never told her what he was doing. He'd known she'd throw herself into it completely, risk everything for a cause she believed in. He'd been right. They were planning their next target, a freight company in York, when everything went wrong. It started with a woman approaching their camp one night. She came alone, hands raised, calling out before she got close. "Mr. Crowe? Mrs. Whitlock? I need to talk to you." Elias had his gun out immediately. "Who are you?" "My name is Sarah Chen. I work for a newspaper in Omaha. I've been following your activities." She stepped into the firelight, and Clara saw she was young, maybe 30, with tired eyes and ink stains on her fingers. "I want to help." "We don't need help," Clara said. "Yes, you do. You're making Mercer bleed, but you're not killing him. He's regrouping, consolidating power, preparing a counterstrike. I have sources inside his organization, people who want him gone but are too afraid to act." Sarah pulled out a notebook. "I know things Thomas Whitlock didn't document, places you haven't hit yet, people you don't know about." Elias and Clara exchanged a glance. "Why would you help us?" Elias asked. "Because Dalton Mercer destroyed my family. My father owned a freight business in Kansas. When he refused to work with Mercer, they burned his warehouses and framed him for insurance fraud. He died in prison." Sarah's voice was steady, but her hand shook. "I've been investigating Mercer for 3 years. I have evidence, but no one will publish it. Too many editors are afraid or bought off. When I heard what you were doing, I realized you're the only ones actually fighting back." "And what do you want in return?" Clara asked. "The story. When this is over, I want exclusive access. I want to write the truth about what happened, about what you did." "We might not survive for there to be a story." "Then I'll write about your deaths and make sure everyone knows why you died." Sarah met Clara's eyes. "I'm not afraid of Mercer anymore. I'm tired of watching him win." Clara looked at Elias. He shrugged slightly, leaving the decision to her. "All right," Clara said finally, "but you follow our rules. You don't take unnecessary risks, and if we say run, you run. Understood?" "Understood." Sarah became their third. She brought intelligence they desperately needed. Details about Mercer's security, names of associates Thomas hadn't identified, locations of hidden assets. With her help, they accelerated their campaign.
They hit 2 more targets in 3 days. A bank in Crete that was laundering Mercer's money. A politician in Seward who was facilitating land fraud. Each strike was more brazen than the last, but Mercer was adapting. His guards were more alert. His operations were harder to infiltrate, and Clara could feel him closing in, tightening the net. It came to a head in a town called Millstone, where Thomas's journal indicated Mercer kept a safe house. According to Sarah's sources, important documents were stored there. Contracts, blackmail material, the kind of evidence that could bring down politicians and businessmen across 3 states. "This is it," Elias said, studying the house from across the street. "We get those documents, and we have enough to force a federal investigation that Mercer can't stop." "It's too obvious," Clara said. "He knows we're using Thomas's information. This could be a trap." "Could be, but if those documents exist, we can't leave them." They went in at dawn when the guards would be tired and less alert. The house was large, set back from the street with a walled garden. They climbed the wall and dropped into shadows. Too quiet. Clara felt it immediately. The wrongness, the trap snapping shut. The guards came from everywhere. 8, 10, more. They'd been waiting. Elias fired first, dropping 2 before the rest opened up. Clara ran for the house, shooting wildly, more to create chaos than to hit anyone. They burst through a back door into a kitchen where a guard was scrambling for his weapon. Elias hit him with the butt of his gun, and the man went down. They ran deeper into the house, guards shouting behind them, upstairs through hallways, looking for a way out that didn't exist. Sarah's voice crackled through the small radio they'd acquired. "It's a trap! Get out!" "We noticed," Clara shouted back. They reached a bedroom, and Elias barricaded the door with furniture. Outside, footsteps pounded closer. Through the window, Clara saw more men surrounding the house. "We're pinned," Elias said. Clara looked around desperately. The room had no other exits, just the window, and the drop was 30 feet down onto stone. "The roof," she said suddenly. "We go up." They climbed out the window and scrambled onto the roof's steep slope. Below, guards burst into the bedroom. Clara and Elias crawled to the peak and over to the other side, and found themselves staring at Dalton Mercer. He stood on the roof of the neighboring building 15 feet away, flanked by riflemen. His expression was almost amused. "Did you really think I wouldn't figure out your pattern?" he called across the gap. "You've been following that journal like a map. Every target, every operation exactly as Thomas documented them. I've been waiting for you to come here." Clara's finger tightened on her rifle trigger, but the angle was wrong and Mercer's men had clear shots. "It's over," Mercer continued. "You've cost me money and time, but you haven't actually hurt me. My network is too large, too entrenched. Kill me and someone else steps up. Destroy one operation and I open 2 more elsewhere." He smiled. "You were never going to win. You're just a widow and a disgraced investigator playing at being heroes." "We exposed you," Clara said. "People know what you are. Some people suspect. Most don't care as long as their lives aren't affected. That's the truth you're learning too late. Nobody cares about justice until injustice touches them personally." Mercer gestured and his men raised their rifles. "Now, throw down the journal and your weapons. Do it, or we shoot the girl." 2 guards dragged Sarah into view. She was bleeding from a cut on her forehead, hands bound. Clara's heart stopped. "Sarah, don't." Sarah's voice was steady. "Don't give him anything." One of Mercer's men put a gun to her head. "Last chance," Mercer said. Clara looked at Elias, saw the calculation in his eyes, the same math she was doing. They couldn't win this fight, but if they surrendered, they'd die anyway, and the journal would die with them. She thought of Thomas, of everything he'd sacrificed, of the choice he'd made knowing it might kill him. "I'm sorry," she whispered to Sarah. Then she threw Thomas's journal off the roof. It tumbled through the air, pages fluttering, and landed in the garden below where flames from a dropped lantern were already spreading. The journal caught fire immediately, 300 pages of evidence turning to ash. Mercer's face went white with rage. "Kill them!" The gunfire was instant and overwhelming. Clara threw herself flat as bullets tore through the air. Beside her, Elias was shooting back, his gun barking. Someone screamed. One of Mercer's men hit, falling. Clara crawled to the roof's edge, looked down. The garden below was burning now, flames spreading to the house. Smoke billowed up, thick and choking. "We jump," she shouted. "That's 30 feet. Better than staying here." She didn't wait for agreement. Clara grabbed Elias's hand and they jumped together into smoke and fire and the possibility that they wouldn't survive the landing. They hit hard. Clara's ankle twisted and pain shot through her leg. Beside her, Elias was groaning, trying to get up. The garden around them was an inferno. Through the smoke, Clara saw the journal's remains, just ash and burned leather now. Everything Thomas died for, gone. Except it wasn't. She'd memorized the important sections. So had Elias. And Sarah had her own notes, her own records. The journal was burned, but the knowledge survived. Clara pulled Elias upright and they ran, limping through the burning garden. Behind them, the house was collapsing, flames reaching toward the sky. Guards were shouting, confused by smoke and chaos. They made it to the street where Sarah was waiting, blood streaming down her face, but alive, somehow alive. "I got away," she gasped. "When the shooting started—" "Later," Clara cut her off. "Run now. Talk later." They disappeared into Millstone streets. 3 fugitives with no journal, no evidence, nothing but the information in their heads, and the knowledge that Dalton Mercer would never stop hunting them until one side or the other was dead. They holed up in an abandoned farmhouse 10 miles outside Millstone, all 3 of them bloodied and exhausted. Sarah's head wound needed stitches Clara didn't know how to give. Elias's ribs were probably cracked from the jump. Clara's ankle was swollen to twice its normal size. And the journal was ash. Clara sat on the floor with her back against the wall, staring at nothing. They'd come so far, burned so many of Mercer's operations, and for what? The one piece of evidence that could have destroyed him completely was gone. "We still have what we remember," Elias said quietly. He was wrapping Sarah's head with strips torn from his shirt. "The locations, the names, the patterns, that's not nothing." "It's not enough either." Clara's voice came out flat. "Without physical evidence, it's just our word against his, and he owns half the officials who'd need to prosecute him." Sarah winced as Elias tied off the bandage. "Not all of them, I told you. I have sources. People inside his organization who want out but are too afraid to move first. If we can give them a reason to believe Mercer's vulnerable." "He's not vulnerable. We just proved that." Clara looked at her swollen ankle. "He walked away from that fire without a scratch while we barely escaped with our lives." "Because he had the advantage," Elias said. "We walked into his trap. That won't happen again." "Why not? He knows how we think now. He's read Thomas's journal, knows every location we might target. We've lost our element of surprise." The room fell silent. Outside, night was coming on fast, bringing cold with it. They had no food, little ammunition, and nowhere safe to go. Clara thought about her farm, the life she'd had just weeks ago. It felt like years, like someone else's memory. "We need to reach Samuel Cooper," Elias said finally. "Clara's right. Without documentation, we can't make a case. But Cooper has resources, access to federal records, investigative authority. If we can get to him, explain what we know." "Lincoln's 4 days' ride and Mercer has people watching every route," Sarah cut in. "We'd never make it." "Then we don't ride." Elias looked at them both. "We take the train. 3 separate tickets, different departures, meet in Lincoln. Mercer's watching for 3 fugitives traveling together. He won't spot individuals." Clara wanted to argue, but she was too tired, too defeated. "Fine. When?" "Tomorrow. We rest tonight, split up at dawn. Sarah goes first, then you, then me. We meet at the federal building in Lincoln in 3 days. And if one of us doesn't make it, then the others finish it." Elias's voice was hard. "This isn't about us anymore. It's about making sure Thomas and everyone else Mercer killed didn't die for nothing." They slept in shifts, keeping watch for riders who never came. Maybe Mercer thought they died in the fire. Maybe he was regrouping, or maybe he was just toying with them, letting them run until they had nowhere left to go. Dawn broke gray and cold. Sarah left first, walking toward the nearest town with just the clothes on her back and enough money for train fare. She looked small and breakable in the early light, her head bandaged stark white against dark hair. "Be careful," Clara told her. "You too." Sarah managed a smile. "See you in Lincoln." She walked away and didn't look back. Clara watched until she disappeared over a rise, then turned to Elias. "You really think we can trust her?" "As much as we can trust anyone." He handed Clara a coat he'd found in the farmhouse. Your turn. Train station's in Hartwell, about 6 miles north. There's a departure at noon. What about you? I'll take the evening train from a different town. Less likely to be recognized if we're not together. He paused. Clara, if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen. If it does, Samuel Cooper works out of the federal building, 3rd floor. Tell him everything. He'll believe you. Clara wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she nodded and started walking. The 6 miles took her 3 hours. Her ankle screamed with every step, but she forced herself to keep moving. She passed farmers heading to market, a family in a wagon, 2 riders who didn't give her a second glance. Just another woman walking alone, nothing suspicious. Hartwell was bigger than she expected. Maybe 1,000 people, with actual paved streets and brick buildings. The train station sat on the east side, a narrow platform with a small office attached. Clara bought her ticket from a clerk who barely looked at her and found a bench to wait. The train was late. Clara sat watching other passengers arrive, studying faces, looking for anyone who might be watching back. An older couple with their grandchildren. A businessman reading a newspaper. 3 young men who looked like ranch hands heading to the city for work. No one suspicious. But Clara's hands wouldn't stop shaking. The train finally arrived at noon, belching steam and coal smoke. Clara climbed aboard and found a seat in the last car, by a window where she could watch the platform. The train lurched into motion and Hartwell fell away behind them. Only then did Clara let herself breathe. The journey took all day and into the night. Clara dozed fitfully, jerking awake every time the train stopped at a station. Other passengers came and went. An old woman sat beside Clara for a while, knitting something shapeless. A traveling salesman tried to make conversation, but gave up when Clara ignored him. Lincoln appeared just after dark. Lights spreading across the horizon, more buildings than Clara had ever seen in one place. The train pulled into the station, and she stepped onto the platform with dozens of other arrivals, just another face in the crowd. The federal building was easy to find. It dominated the center of town, 4 stories of granite and authority. But it was closed for the night, dark except for a few lit windows on the upper floors. Clara found a boarding house 2 streets over and paid for a room. The landlady asked no questions, just handed over a key and pointed up the stairs. Inside, Clara locked the door and collapsed on the bed fully clothed. She'd made it. 1 down, 2 to go. She woke to pounding on the door. Clara shot upright, grabbing for a weapon she didn't have. "Who is it?" "It's me." Sarah's voice, muffled but recognizable. Clara opened the door. Sarah stood in the hallway looking worse than when they'd parted. Her bandage was dirty, her clothes torn, dried blood on her collar. "What happened?" Clara pulled her inside. "I made it to the train fine, but when we stopped in Crete, I saw 2 of Mercer's men on the platform. They were checking passengers, looking for someone." Sarah sank into the room's only chair. "I got off and hid until the train left. Had to steal a horse to get here." "Did they follow you?" "I don't think so. But they're out there looking." Sarah's hands trembled. "Where's Elias?" "Not here yet. He's taking the evening train, should arrive tomorrow morning." "If he makes it." Clara didn't want to think about that possibility. "He'll make it. He survived worse." They spent the night taking turns sleeping and watching the street. Nothing stirred except cats and drunks stumbling home from saloons. When dawn broke, Clara felt like she'd been awake for days. They waited at the train station watching arrivals. The morning train came and went. No Elias, the noon train. Still nothing. "Something's wrong," Sarah said. "Give him time. Maybe he got delayed." But Clara's stomach was tight with dread. The evening train arrived and Elias wasn't on it either. As passengers dispersed into the city, Clara stood on the platform, staring at empty tracks. "We can't wait anymore," Sarah said quietly. "We need to talk to Cooper now, before Mercer's people find us." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to wait for Elias, to not give up on him, but Sarah was right. Every hour they delayed was another chance for Mercer to track them down. "All right," Clara said. "Tomorrow morning. Federal building opens at 8. They went back to the boarding house and tried to sleep. Clara dreamed of fire and falling, of Thomas's journal burning, of Elias's face disappearing into smoke. She woke gasping, her heart racing. Beside her, Sarah was already awake. "Bad dreams?" "Something like that." "Me too." Sarah sat up. "Clara, what Mercer said back in Millstone. About nobody caring about justice until it affects them personally. Do you think he's right? I think some people care, not enough, maybe. But some. Thomas cared. He died for it. Yeah. Clara's throat tightened. He did. And you could have walked away after the farm burned, could have taken Elias's money and disappeared. But you didn't. I was angry, still am. It's more than that. Sarah looked at her. You're fighting because you believe it matters, because you think the world can be better than what Mercer's made it. Clara thought about that. I don't know if the world can be better, but I know it won't get better if people like us don't fight back. That has to count for something. Morning came too fast. They walked to the federal building together, two women who'd survived fire and bullets and betrayal. The building was already busy, clerks and officials hurrying to their offices, petitioners waiting in the lobby with papers in hand. Clara approached the desk. We need to see Samuel Cooper. The clerk barely looked up. Third floor, Marshal's office. Do you have an appointment? No, but Marshal Cooper doesn't see anyone without an appointment. You'll need to submit a request in writing and tell him Elias Crowe sent us. Clara's voice was harder than she intended. Tell him it's about Dalton Mercer. The clerk's eyes sharpened. Wait here. He disappeared up the stairs. Clara and Sarah stood in the lobby, surrounded by the machinery of federal justice that hadn't helped them yet. 5 minutes passed. 10. Then a man appeared at the top of the stairs, 60 years old, maybe older, with white hair and a marshal's badge on his coat. His face was weathered and hard, the kind of face that had seen too much and stopped being surprised by human cruelty. You mentioned Elias Crowe, he said. His voice carried down the stairs, cutting through the lobby noise. Where is he? We don't know, Clara said. We got separated, but we have information about Dalton Mercer's organization. Information Elias and my husband gathered. Cooper studied them for a long moment. Then he gestured. Come up. His office was small and cluttered, papers stacked on every surface. A map of the territory covered one wall, marked with pins and notes. Cooper closed the door and pointed to 2 chairs. Start talking. Clara and Sarah spent the next 2 hours telling him everything. About Thomas's investigation, the journal, the locations they'd hit, the evidence they'd burned. Cooper listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When they finished, he leaned back and stared at the ceiling. So you have no physical evidence, just memory and hearsay. Thomas's journal documented everything, and it's ash, which means I have nothing I can take to a prosecutor. Cooper rubbed his face. Do you understand what you're asking me to do? Launch a federal investigation against one of the most powerful men in the territory based on the testimony of 2 fugitives and a missing investigator I fired 6 years ago. You didn't fire him, Clara said. He was forced out by corrupt officials on Mercer's payroll. I know. I fought it. I lost. Cooper's voice was bitter. Elias was the best investigator I ever trained. He got close to something that scared powerful people, and they destroyed his career to shut him up. I couldn't stop them then. What makes you think I can stop Mercer now? Because we're not asking you to do it alone. Sarah leaned forward. I have sources inside Mercer's organization. People who'll testify if they believe they'll be protected. And I have documentation of my own. Financial records, shipping manifests, letters I've collected over 3 years of investigation. Cooper's eyes narrowed. Why didn't you mention this earlier? Because I needed to know you'd take us seriously first. Sarah pulled papers from inside her coat. Here, 6 months of evidence. Not as complete as Thomas's journal, but it's something. Cooper took the papers and read through them slowly. His expression didn't change, but Clara saw his grip tighten on the pages. This is good, he said finally. Better than good. If even half of this holds up. He stopped, looked at them. Where's Elias? Really? We don't know, Clara admitted. He was supposed to take a train yesterday, but never arrived. Either he got caught, or he's dead. Cooper said it bluntly. Mercer doesn't take prisoners. The words hit Clara like a fist. She'd known it was possible, likely even, but hearing someone say it out loud made it real. If he's gone, you 2 are the only witnesses I have, Cooper continued, which means you're targets. Mercer will send everything he's got to silence you before you can testify. Let him try.
Clara was surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. I'm done running. Noble sentiment. Won't stop a bullet. Cooper stood and moved to the map on his wall. Here's what we're going to do. I'll put you both under federal protection while I verify this evidence. If it checks out, and I think it will, I'll bring charges. But that process takes weeks, maybe months. Are you prepared to hide that long? Do we have a choice? Sarah asked. There's always a choice, but most of them are bad. Cooper pulled a pin from the map and repositioned it. I have a safe house outside the city. Nobody knows about it except me. You'll stay there until... The door burst open. A deputy rushed in, his face pale. Sir, we have a situation. Armed men outside demanding we release 2 fugitives. They're saying the women are wanted for arson and murder. Cooper's jaw tightened. How many men? At least 20, maybe more. They've got the building surrounded. Clara's blood ran cold. Mercer. He'd found them. Cooper grabbed his gun belt from a hook on the wall. Take them out the back. There's a tunnel that connects to the courthouse next door. Move fast. What about you? Clara asked. I'll buy you time. Cooper looked at her and there was something in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Elias chose well when he trusted you. Don't waste it. They ran. Downstairs, through hallways, following the deputy who led them to a basement door Clara never would have noticed. Behind it, a tunnel stretched into darkness. Go straight until you hit stairs, the deputy said. They'll take you up into the courthouse. Exit through the east doors and head for the river. There's a boathouse. Cooper keeps a skiff there for emergencies. Come with us, Sarah said. Someone needs to lock this door behind you. Make it look like you never came down here. He pulled out his revolver. Now go. They ran into darkness. Behind them, the door closed and the lock clicked. The tunnel was narrow and damp, the walls pressing close. Clara's ankle screamed, but she ignored it, focusing on the sound of Sarah's breathing ahead of her. Stairs appeared exactly as promised. They climbed and emerged in a courthouse basement that smelled like old paper and mold. Up more stairs through a side door into an alley. Gunfire erupted somewhere close. Shouting. The sounds of a battle Clara and Sarah couldn't see and couldn't help win. They ran for the river. Lincoln's waterfront was industrial and grim. Warehouses, loading docks, the constant smell of fish and engine oil. Clara found the boathouse tucked between 2 larger structures, its door hanging loose on rusted hinges. Inside, a small skiff floated in dark water. They climbed in and Sarah found the oars. The boat rocked dangerously as they pushed off, drifting into the current. Where are we going? Sarah asked. Clara didn't have an answer. They'd lost Cooper. Maybe lost him permanently. Lost Elias. Lost everything except Sarah's documentation and the information in their heads. The river carried them south, away from the city, away from the gunfire that was still echoing somewhere behind them. Clara looked back once and saw smoke rising from the federal building's direction. She turned away and didn't look back again. They drifted for hours, taking turns rowing, staying quiet. The river narrowed and widened, passing under bridges, winding through farmland that looked peaceful and oblivious to the violence happening upstream. As darkness fell, they pulled the boat onto a muddy bank and collapsed in the weeds. Clara's entire body ached. Her ankle was the size of a melon now, purple and swollen. We can't keep running like this, Sarah said. Eventually we'll run out of places to hide. I know. So what do we do? Clara thought about Cooper's face as he'd sent them away, about Elias disappearing, about Thomas dying to gather evidence that burned, about standing in that courtroom while men laughed at her humiliation. We stop running, she said. We go back. Back where? To Mercer, to the center of everything. Clara sat up, ignoring the pain. He thinks we're scattered and desperate, thinks he's broken us. So we use that. We walk straight into his headquarters and we finish this. Sarah stared at her. That's insane. Probably, but everything else has failed. The journal's gone, federal protection's gone. We tried doing this the right way, and it got people killed. Clara looked at her hands, scarred, dirty, shaking slightly. So we do it the wrong way. We find Mercer and we force him to answer for what he's done, even if it kills us. It will kill us, maybe, but at least it'll be our choice. At least we'll die fighting instead of hiding. Clara met Sarah's eyes. Thomas died fighting. Elias probably did too.
I'm not going to dishonor them by running until Mercer's people finally catch up and shoot me in the back. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she nodded slowly. All right. Where's Mercer's headquarters? According to Thomas's journal, he has a ranch 50 miles west of Omaha. Big operation, heavily guarded. That's where he runs everything from. How do we even get close? We don't sneak. We walk up to the front door and knock. Clara pulled Sarah's papers from inside her coat. We tell him we want to negotiate. His evidence for our lives. He'll bring us in because he'll want to kill us personally, want to make sure we're really dead this time. And when we're inside, then we improvise. Clara knew how weak that sounded. Look, I don't have a perfect plan, but I know Mercer's arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable. That's his weakness. We use it. Sarah looked at the papers in Clara's hands. Those are the only evidence I have left. Everything I've worked for. If we give them to Mercer, we won't. We'll make him think we're giving them up, but we'll find a way to preserve the information first. Memorize the key details, hide copies, something. That's not much of a plan. I know, but it's what we have. They spent that night in an abandoned barn, memorizing everything in Sarah's papers. Names, dates, financial records, shipping routes. Clara wrote some of it down on scraps of paper she tucked into the lining of her coat, places no one would think to look. By dawn, they'd absorbed what they could. It wasn't enough. 300 pages distilled into fragments and memory. But it was better than nothing. They stole horses from a farm 2 miles upriver. Clara hated it, left a note promising to return them or pay for them somehow. Then they rode west toward Omaha, toward Mercer's ranch, toward the end of whatever this was. The ranch appeared on the third day, sprawling across a valley like a small kingdom. Main house, barns, bunkhouses, corrals full of horses. Armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Clara counted at least 30 men, probably more inside. Last chance to change your mind, Sarah said. Clara thought about Thomas, about the farm that didn't exist anymore, about everything that had led her from that courtroom to this moment. No, she said. No more chances. We finish it. They rode up to the main gate. Guards raised rifles immediately. One of them stepped forward, his face scarred and familiar. The man who'd chased them outside Millstone. Well, well, he said. The widow and the reporter. Mr. Mercer's been hoping you'd show up. We need to talk to him, Clara said. Tell him we're ready to negotiate. The guard grinned. Oh, he'll see you, but you're not going to like the conversation. They were dragged off their horses and searched. The guards found the papers Sarah was carrying and Clara's hidden notes. Everything confiscated, everything taken. Clara met Sarah's eyes and saw the same thought reflected there. They'd just made the worst mistake of their lives. And there was no taking it back. They were marched across the compound to the main house. Inside was elegant in a way that felt obscene. Expensive furniture, paintings on the walls, a chandelier hanging in the entry hall. The house of a man who'd built an empire on theft and murder and dressed it up to look respectable. Dalton Mercer waited in what looked like a study. He stood by the window with a drink in his hand, backlit by afternoon sun. When they entered, he turned and smiled. Mrs. Whitlock, Miss Chen, I'm so glad you decided to visit. He set down his drink and moved closer. Though I have to say walking into my home and surrendering was unexpected. I thought you'd at least make me work for it. We're tired of running, Clara said. We want this over. How refreshingly honest. Mercer gestured to his men. Search them again, thoroughly. The guards went through their clothes, their boots, everywhere. They found 2 more hidden notes Clara had tucked away, found a knife Sarah had concealed, found everything. That's all of it, Clara lied. I doubt that. But it doesn't matter. Mercer picked up Sarah's papers and flipped through them. These are interesting, more detailed than I expected. Miss Chen, you've been a busy journalist. I've been documenting your crimes for 3 years, Sarah said. Crimes. Such an ugly word. Mercer set the papers down. I prefer to think of it as business. Supply and demand, transactions between willing parties. The fact that some of those transactions happen to be illegal is really just a technicality. You killed my husband, Clara said. Yes, I did. Well, I had him killed. There's a distinction. Mercer's voice stayed casual. Thomas made it personal when he stole information from my operations. I gave him multiple chances to stop. He refused. Actions have consequences. So do yours. Clara stepped forward and one of the guards grabbed her arm. She ignored him, focused on Mercer. You've spent years thinking you're untouchable, building this empire, buying officials, crushing anyone who opposed you. But it's falling apart. Your operations are burning. Your people are abandoning you. And we've made sure the evidence will reach federal authorities whether we live or die. Mercer laughed. You burned the journal, Mrs. Whitlock. I was there, remember? Watched Thomas's documentation turn to ash. The journal's gone. The information isn't. We memorized it, shared it with others, made copies you'll never find. Clara was bluffing, but she made her voice certain. Kill us, and it changes nothing. We've already won. The smile faded from Mercer's face. Bold words for a woman who just walked into my custody. We didn't walk into custody. We walked into your headquarters to deliver a message. Clara held his gaze. You can't kill all of us. There are too many people who know what you've done. Federal marshals, journalists, witnesses willing to testify. The empire you built is crumbling, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I can start by making an example of you.
Then do it. Prove me right.
Show everyone that the only way Dalton Mercer can handle opposition is through violence and murder. Clara's voice was steady now. All fear burned away. Kill me, and you'll be confirming everything we've said about you. You'll be the monster the newspapers will write about. The villain parents tell their children about as a warning. Mercer stared at her. Something shifted in his expression. Uncertainty, maybe, or the first crack in his arrogance. Then the door burst open and Elias Crowe walked in. He looked like he'd been through hell. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, blood crusted on his shirt. But he was alive, and he was walking, and he had Samuel Cooper beside him, flanked by 6 federal marshals with rifles raised. Dalton Mercer, Cooper's voice rang out with official authority. You're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, racketeering, and 43 other federal charges. Drop your weapons and surrender. The room exploded into chaos. Mercer's guards reached for guns. The marshals opened fire. Clara threw herself flat as bullets tore through the air. Someone grabbed her. Sarah, pulling her behind a heavy desk. They huddled there while the gunfight raged, the study filling with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. It was over in seconds. Mercer's men were outnumbered and outgunned. They dropped their weapons one by one, raising their hands in surrender. Clara stood slowly. Across the room, Elias was on his knees, barely conscious. Cooper had a gun pressed to Mercer's head while 2 marshals locked him in irons. How? Clara started. Later, Cooper said. Right now we need to secure this property and arrest everyone involved. Can you 2 walk? Clara looked at Sarah. They both nodded. Good. Because you're going to need to testify. All of it. Everything you know. Cooper hauled Mercer to his feet. This bastard's going to prison for the rest of his life, and you 2 are going to make sure he stays there. They found more than they expected when they searched the ranch. Financial records stored in a hidden safe. Correspondence with corrupt officials. Lists of people on Mercer's payroll. The evidence Thomas had died gathering was scattered throughout the property, hidden but not destroyed. It took federal marshals 3 days to catalog everything. During that time, Clara and Sarah gave statements, identified witnesses, helped piece together the full scope of Mercer's organization. More arrests followed. Judges, sheriffs, politicians, all of them dragged into custody as the network collapsed. Elias recovered slowly. Cooper had found him 2 days earlier, beaten and left for dead beside a railroad track. Mercer's men had caught him before he could board the train, tortured him for information about Clara and Sarah's location. I didn't tell them anything, Elias said when Clara visited him in the doctor's office. Even when they broke my ribs, even when they thought I was dying, I didn't give you up. You should have, Clara said. Your life is worth more than information. Not to me. Elias struggled to sit up. Thomas trusted me to finish what he started. I wasn't going to betray that by breaking. Clara sat beside him. Thank you for everything, for marrying me when I had nowhere else to turn, for fighting when you could have walked away, for... Don't. Elias touched her hand. You don't owe me gratitude. If anything, I owe you an apology. I got Thomas killed, almost got you killed, dragged you into a war you never asked to fight. Thomas made his choice. So did I. Clara squeezed his hand. We both did what we thought was right. That has to count for something. It took 6 months for the trials to begin. Clara testified for 3 days straight, telling the whole story from the courthouse humiliation to the final confrontation at Mercer's ranch. Sarah testified for 4 days, presenting the documentation she'd gathered over years of investigation. The evidence was overwhelming. Mercer's organization crumbled as witnesses flipped, as corrupt officials scrambled to make deals, as the full scope of the criminal network became public. Mercer himself never showed remorse. He sat in the courtroom like a king in exile, contemptuous of the proceedings. But when the judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts, life in prison without possibility of parole, something broke in his face. For just a moment, Clara saw fear. Good. Let him be afraid. Let him spend the rest of his life knowing that 2 women he'd tried to break had destroyed everything he'd built. Afterward, in the courthouse hallway, Samuel Cooper found Clara. "There's something you should know. We recovered Thomas's original journal." Clara's breath caught. "What?" One of Mercer's men had kept it as insurance. When we arrested him, he used it to bargain for a lighter sentence. Cooper handed her a leather-bound book, its pages smoke-damaged but intact. "Thought you'd want it back." Clara opened the journal and saw Thomas's handwriting. Her vision blurred with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. The trials dragged on through winter and into spring. More convictions, more arrests. The entire corrupt system Thomas had died exposing collapsed under federal scrutiny. Judges were removed from office. Sheriffs were imprisoned. Politicians resigned in disgrace. It wasn't perfect justice. Some guilty people escaped. Some evidence was lost. But it was something. It was change. Clara spent that time recovering, both physically and mentally. Her ankle healed slowly, leaving her with a permanent limp. The nightmares took longer. Dreams of fire and falling, of gunshots and Thomas's face fading into shadow. But she survived. She'd promised herself that much. Spring came to Nebraska like an apology. The snow melted, revealing earth that was still good beneath all the blood and ash. Clara stood on what used to be her farm and tried to see it the way Thomas had, as possibility, as home, as something worth dying for. The house was gone. The barn was a skeleton, but the land remained. Elias walked up beside her, his limp almost as pronounced as hers now. Neither of them had healed quite right. Maybe they never would. "You thinking about rebuilding?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "No, this place is haunted now. Every time I look at it, I see the fire, see Thomas dying for secrets he hid in that workshop." She turned to him. "I think I need to start somewhere new, somewhere that doesn't carry all this weight." "Makes sense." Elias was quiet for a moment. "I got word from Cooper yesterday. 3 more of Mercer's associates were arrested in Kansas. The network's still collapsing." "Good." He also said something interesting. Said the federal government is looking for investigators. People who understand how criminal organizations work, who aren't afraid to dig deep. Elias glanced at her. "He mentioned your name specifically." Clara laughed, surprised. "I'm not an investigator. I'm a farmer's widow who got dragged into something I didn't understand. You're a woman who destroyed one of the largest criminal operations west of the Mississippi with nothing but stubborn courage and a dead man's journal." Elias's voice was serious. "That's more than most trained investigators ever accomplish. I don't want to spend my life hunting criminals." "Then what do you want?" It was the question Clara had been avoiding for months. What did she want? Not the farm, not Nebraska with its memories, not revenge. That had been satisfied when Mercer was locked away. "Peace," she said finally. "I want to wake up and not feel like someone's hunting me. I want to build something that doesn't get burned down. I want—" She stopped. "I don't know. I just know it's not here." "Then let's go." Clara looked at him. "Where?" "Oregon, Washington, California. Somewhere the past doesn't follow us." Elias's expression was careful, like he was afraid of pushing too hard. "We're still legally married. That doesn't have to mean anything if you don't want it to. But we could travel together, start over somewhere new." "As what? Husband and wife?" "As partners. Friends? Whatever you're comfortable with." He paused. "I know this started as a transaction, a desperate arrangement in a courthouse. But somewhere along the way it became something else. At least for me." Clara thought about the man who'd stepped forward when she had nowhere to turn. who'd paid her debts without hesitation, who'd fought beside her through fire and bullets and impossible odds. She thought about how he'd never tried to claim her farm, never demanded anything beyond what she'd agreed to give. "For me too," she admitted. "But I don't know what that means. I love Thomas. Still love him in a way. I'm not sure I have room for I'm not asking you to love me." Elias's voice was gentle. "I'm just asking if you want to try building something new, together. No pressure, no expectations, just two people who survived hell and want to see if there's anything good on the other side." Clara looked at the ruined farm one last time. Then she looked at Elias, scarred and damaged and honest in a way most people never were. "All right," she said, "let's go." They sold the land to a family from Iowa who didn't know its history and didn't ask questions. The money was enough to buy train tickets west and have something left over to start fresh. Clara donated half to a fund Samuel Cooper was establishing for victims of organized crime. The rest she kept, practicality winning over sentiment. Sarah Chen found them the day before they left. She'd been offered a position at a newspaper in San Francisco, writing investigative pieces about corruption in the territories. Her series on Mercer's empire had made her famous in certain circles, feared in others. "Thought I'd say goodbye," Sarah said, "and thank you. Without you two, I'd have never gotten the story, never gotten justice for my father." "You gave us evidence when we had nothing," Clara said. "We're even." "Are we?" Sarah smiled. "I'm not sure that's how it works, but I'll take it." She handed Clara a leather-bound book. "I wrote down everything that happened. Edited version, obviously. No names, no locations that could hurt anyone who helped us. But the truth of what we did. What you did." Clara opened the book and saw the title, "The Widow Who Refused to Break." Her throat tightened. "Sarah, don't argue. It's already done. Publisher's printing 5,000 copies. Sarah's eyes were bright. "People need to know what happened. They need to understand that ordinary people can fight back against systems designed to crush them. You showed me that. Let me show others." Clara looked at the pages filled with Sarah's neat handwriting, her story, Thomas's story, the story of what they'd all sacrificed and survived. "Thank you," she whispered. Sarah hugged her, fierce and quick. Then she was gone, heading toward her own future, carrying the weight of everything they'd endured into words that would outlast them all. The train west left at dawn. Clara and Elias boarded with nothing but 2 bags and the clothes on their backs. As Lincoln fell away behind them, Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief exactly, more like permission to finally breathe. They didn't talk much during the journey, just watched the landscape change through the windows. Nebraska's grasslands giving way to Wyoming's mountains, then the high desert of Idaho. Other passengers came and went, each carrying their own stories, their own reasons for running or searching or starting over. In a small town in eastern Oregon, they got off the train on impulse. The place was called Riverwood, tucked into a valley where the Cascade Mountains rose like promises on the horizon. Population maybe 300, a main street with a general store and a church and a hotel that had seen better days. "This feels right," Clara said, looking around. Elias nodded. "Yeah, it does." They rented a room at the hotel and spent a week exploring. The town was peaceful in a way Nebraska had never been. Isolated enough that news traveled slowly, big enough to have community, small enough that newcomers weren't immediately suspect. The land around it was good for farming if you worked hard and didn't mind rain. Clara bought 20 acres on the northern edge of town with the money from her old farm. It wasn't much, but it was hers, purchased legally with her name on the deed. No debts, no corrupt officials circling like vultures, just land and possibility. They built a house together over that first summer. Nothing fancy, just 4 rooms and a porch where you could watch the sunset behind the mountains. Elias did most of the heavy work while Clara's ankle finished healing. By September, they had a roof and walls and a door that locked from the inside. It felt like victory. Neighbors came by occasionally, curious about the newcomers. Clara told them she was a widow from Nebraska, that Elias was her second husband, that they'd come west for a fresh start. All true enough. Nobody asked for details, and Clara didn't offer them. In October, a letter arrived from Samuel Cooper. Mercer had died in prison, stabbed by another inmate who'd lost his brother to one of Mercer's operations. The official report called it an unfortunate incident. Cooper's letter was more direct. Justice found him one way or another. Thought you'd want to know. Clara burned the letter in the stove and tried to feel something. Relief, satisfaction, closure. Instead, she just felt tired. Mercer's death didn't bring Thomas back, didn't undo the trauma or erase the nightmares. It was just another ending in a story with too many of them. "You all right?" Elias asked that night. "I don't know." Clara stared out the window at darkness. "I thought his death would mean something, make me feel like it was finally over, but it doesn't." "That's because it's not about him anymore. It stopped being about him the moment he went to prison." Elias moved beside her. "What we're dealing with now is everything that came after, the cost of surviving. That doesn't go away just because the villain dies." "Then what makes it go away?" "Time, maybe. Building something new that matters more than what we lost. I don't know if there's a formula." He paused. "But I think you're already doing it. This house, this land. Choosing to keep going even when it would be easier to give up. That's how you win. Not by destroying your enemies, but by refusing to let them destroy you." Clara thought about that. About standing in a courthouse being told to choose a husband or lose everything. About running through fire and bullets. About testifying in front of judges and crowds, speaking truth even when it terrified her. She'd survived. That had to count for something. Winter came hard that year, snow piling up until the world turned white and silent. Clara and Elias spent long evenings by the fire, reading or talking or just existing in comfortable quiet. Slowly, carefully, they learned to be more than reluctant partners, learned to laugh together, to share fears, to trust in ways neither had thought possible after everything they'd endured. It wasn't love. Not yet. Maybe it never would be. But it was something real and good, and earned through shared trauma and stubborn hope. Spring returned and Clara planted her first garden. The soil was different from Nebraska's, richer and darker. Things grew easily here if you paid attention. She planted vegetables and herbs, practical things. But she also planted flowers, wild roses and columbines and lupines that turned the hillside purple in June. Thomas had always said flowers were a waste of space. Better to plant things you could eat. But Clara planted them anyway, a small rebellion against practicality, a promise that beauty mattered even when the world was hard. A year passed. Then 2. Life settled into rhythms that felt almost normal. Clara raised chickens and sold eggs in town. Elias did carpentry work, building furniture and fixing things for neighbors. They were known in Riverwood as the quiet couple from back east, hardworking and polite, keeping mostly to themselves. Nobody knew what they'd done. Nobody knew who they'd been. And that anonymity felt like freedom. In the 3rd year, Sarah's book reached Riverwood. Clara found it in the general store, displayed with other new arrivals from the publisher. She bought a copy and read it in one sitting, tears streaming down her face as Sarah's words brought everything back. The fear, the rage, the desperate determination to survive. Elias found her on the porch that evening, the book in her lap. "You read it?" he asked. Clara nodded. "She changed our names, changed locations, but the bones of it are true. Everything that mattered." "How do you feel about that? About our story being out there?" "Strange. Exposed, almost. Like everyone who reads this will know things about me I don't want them to know." Clara looked at the mountains. "But also proud. We did something that mattered. Maybe people should know." Sarah did good work. "Yeah, she did." The book sold modestly at first, then caught fire when a newspaper in Boston reviewed it favorably. Suddenly everyone was talking about the widow who'd fought back against corruption, about the criminal empire destroyed by ordinary people refusing to be victims. The story spread across the country, debated in saloons and discussed in churches, held up as proof that justice was possible even when systems failed. Clara and Elias stayed quiet, never confirming they were the real people behind Sarah's narrative. Let people wonder. Let the story be larger than 2 damaged individuals trying to build something new. 4 years after leaving Nebraska, Clara realized she was happy. Not the uncomplicated happiness of ignorance, but the hard-won contentment of someone who'd survived the worst and discovered they were stronger than they'd known. She woke up without fear, worked her land without looking over her shoulder, slept through the night without dreaming of fire. The past was still there. It would always be there, but it no longer defined her. One evening, in late summer, Elias asked the question that had been hanging between them since Lincoln. "Do you still think about Thomas?"
Every day, Clara said honestly. But differently now. Not as an open wound, more like a scar that reminds me where I've been. Do you think he'd approve of how things turned out? Clara considered that. I think he'd be glad I survived, glad his death meant something. Whether he'd approve of us, she gestured between them. I don't know, but I don't think I need his approval anymore. I made my choices. They were mine to make. And do you regret them? No. Clara was surprised by how certain she sounded. I regret what it cost. The violence, the trauma, the people who died, but I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret refusing to let them break me. Elias smiled, small and genuine. Good. Neither do I. That night they made love for the first time since the hasty courthouse marriage that felt like a lifetime ago. It was awkward and tender and nothing like the dramatic passion Sarah would have written into her book. Just two scarred people finding comfort in each other, building intimacy from shared survival and stubborn hope. Afterward, lying in the darkness, Clara felt something shift. The marriage that had started as a desperate transaction had become something real, not perfect, not uncomplicated, but real. I love you, she said quietly, testing the words. Elias pulled her closer. I love you too. It wasn't the grand romance Thomas had given her, but it was honest and earned and enough. Years passed. The world moved on, as worlds do. Mercer's empire faded into history, just another cautionary tale about greed and corruption. New criminals rose to replace him. New injustices demanded attention. The fight was never really over. It just changed shape, evolved, required new heroes to step forward. Clara and Elias watched from their quiet corner of Oregon, raising a family that grew slowly around them. First a daughter they named Margaret, after the woman who'd shown Clara kindness in her darkest hour. Then a son they called Thomas, to honor the man who'd started everything. The children grew up hearing stories about their parents' past, age-appropriate versions that emphasized courage and choices rather than violence and trauma. Clara wanted them to understand that ordinary people could make a difference, that standing up to injustice mattered even when the cost was high. Mama, Margaret asked when she was 7, were you scared when the bad men came? Clara thought about lying, giving the sanitized version. Instead, she said, yes, I was terrified, but I did it anyway. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared and you act anyway, because some things are more important than fear. Like what? Like protecting people you love. Like fighting for what's right even when it's hard. Like refusing to let bullies win just because they're loud and powerful. Clara pulled her daughter close. You're going to face hard choices in your life. Times when standing up means risking something important. I can't tell you what to do in those moments. But I can tell you that living with yourself is easier when you choose courage over comfort. Margaret absorbed this seriously. I want to be brave like you. You already are, sweetheart. You just haven't needed to show it yet. As the children grew, Clara told them more. About Thomas's investigation, about Elias's arrival, about the journal and the fire and the desperate run to Lincoln. She never glorified the violence or made it sound exciting. She made sure they understood that what she'd done came from necessity, not choice, and that the trauma of it lingered long after the danger passed. Why didn't you just let them take the farm? Thomas asked when he was 10. Wouldn't that have been easier? Easier, yes. But it would have meant accepting that powerful people can take whatever they want from those who can't fight back. Clara looked at her son, Thomas's eyes, Elias's stubborn jaw. Sometimes the easy path leads to places you can't live with. Sometimes you have to choose the hard path because it's the only one that lets you look at yourself in the mirror. But you almost died. I did, many times. And there are days I wonder if it was worth it, if anything really changed. Clara was quiet for a moment. But then I think about all the people Mercer hurt who got justice, about the corrupt officials who were removed from power, about Sarah's book inspiring others to fight back against their own oppressors. Maybe I didn't change the world, but I changed my corner of it. That has to mean something. When Margaret turned 18, she announced she wanted to become a lawyer, someone who helps people fight back legally instead of with guns and running. Clara hugged her daughter and tried not to cry. Your grandfather Thomas would have loved that. I know. That's why I'm doing it. Thomas, young Thomas, growing tall and serious,
chose a quieter path. He became a teacher, working with children in small towns across Oregon and Washington, making sure they understood their rights and their worth. He never sought attention or accolades, just did the work quietly, making differences that would ripple forward through generations. Both children carried the legacy forward in their own ways, proving that courage took many forms, that fighting injustice didn't always look like Clara's desperate war against Mercer's empire. Sarah visited occasionally over the years, her hair going gray, her reputation as an investigative journalist growing with each new exposé she published. She never married, never settled down, too busy fighting battles through words instead of bullets. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked during one visit. "What it cost you? The normal life you could have had?" Sarah laughed. "What's a normal life? Getting married, having children, pretending the world's injustices don't exist because they're not personally affecting you?" She shook her head. "I'd rather know I made a difference, even if it meant sacrificing conventional happiness." "But you're alone." "I'm not alone. I'm surrounded by the people I've helped, the stories I've told, the changes I've created." Sarah smiled. "Besides, you don't get to choose what makes you happy. You can only choose what you're willing to fight for and hope the happiness follows." Clara thought about that often in the years that followed, about choices and consequences, about the life she'd built from the ashes of the one that burned. She'd never asked for any of it. Not Thomas's investigation, not the courthouse ultimatum, not the desperate flight across Nebraska, but she'd survived it and found meaning in the survival. That was its own kind of victory. Samuel Cooper died when Clara was 53. She and Elias traveled to Denver for the funeral, a small ceremony attended by federal marshals and investigators whose lives Cooper had shaped. They spoke of his integrity, his courage, his refusal to compromise even when it would have been easier. Afterward, a young marshal approached Clara. "You're her, aren't you? The widow from the book?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. "Marshal Cooper talked about you sometimes. Said you were the bravest person he'd ever met. Said you reminded him why he became a lawman in the first place, to protect people who couldn't protect themselves." He was exaggerating. "I don't think he was." The young marshal smiled. "A lot of us joined because of your story, because someone proved you don't have to be powerful or connected to fight back against corruption. You just have to be willing to try." Clara looked at this young man who'd chosen a dangerous profession because of something she'd done decades ago. "Then make it count. Don't let the work break you. And don't forget that the people you're protecting are human beings, not statistics." "Yes, ma'am." Watching him walk away, Clara felt the weight of legacy. How one desperate act in a courthouse could ripple forward through time, inspiring strangers, changing systems, proving that individuals mattered even in a world designed to make them feel powerless. Maybe that was the real victory. Not defeating Mercer, but showing others it was possible to fight back and survive. Clara grew old in Oregon, her hands gnarled from farm work, her limp more pronounced with each passing year. Elias aged beside her, his dark hair going white, his face weathering into something distinguished. They celebrated 40 years of marriage in the house they'd built together, surrounded by children and grandchildren who carried forward their stubborn refusal to accept injustice. On Clara's 70th birthday, Margaret gave her a gift, a new edition of Sarah's book, updated with a final chapter written by Sarah before her death the previous year. Clara read it slowly, savoring Sarah's words. The chapter was about legacy, about how the widow who'd fought back against Mercer had inspired a generation of women to stand up against their own oppressors, how the story had been taught in schools, adapted into plays, held up as proof that ordinary people could change their world. The final paragraph brought tears to Clara's eyes. Clara Whitlock never saw herself as a hero. She was just a woman backed into a corner who refused to surrender. But history is made by people like her, individuals who, when faced with impossible choices, choose courage over comfort, justice over survival, hope over despair. She proved that power doesn't only flow from wealth or position or violence. Sometimes it comes from the simple, stubborn insistence that you matter, that your life has value, that the world can be better than what cruel men have made it. She lived long enough to see her grandchildren grow up free from the corruption she helped destroy. She died knowing her story mattered. That's more than most of us get. That's everything. Clara set the book down and looked out at the Oregon mountains, still standing where they'd always stood, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs. She thought about the frightened widow who'd stood in that Nebraska courthouse, about to lose everything, about to surrender. She thought about the choice to keep fighting when fighting seemed hopeless. She thought about Thomas and Elias and Sarah and Samuel Cooper and all the others who'd been part of the story. Some dead, some still living, all connected by the stubborn belief that justice mattered. And she thought about the children and grandchildren playing in her yard, growing up in a world that was still broken but slightly better than the one she'd been born into. Not perfect. Never perfect. But better. That would have to be enough. Elias found her on the porch that evening, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "You've been quiet all day," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "Everything all right?" "I've been thinking about what we built. Not just this house, or this farm, but the life we made after everything fell apart." Clara reached for his hand. "Do you think it was worth it? All the pain and fear and loss? I think we survived something that should have killed us. I think we found meaning in the survival. I think we raised children who understand that standing up to injustice matters." Elias squeezed her hand. "So yeah, it was worth it." Clara smiled. "Good answer." They sat in comfortable silence, two old survivors watching the day end. Behind them, their family laughed and talked, carrying forward the legacy they'd built from desperation and courage and stubborn hope. The story that started in a Nebraska courthouse with a widow being told to choose humiliation or destruction had become something larger. A testament to the idea that ordinary people could fight back, that systems designed to crush the powerless could be challenged, that justice, however imperfect, was worth pursuing even when the cost seemed too high. Clara died peacefully 3 years later, surrounded by family, her hand in Elias's. Her last words were simple. "We did good." They buried her on the Oregon hillside she'd loved, under the lupines that turned purple every June. Her headstone was plain, just her name and dates and a single line Sarah had written for her. She refused to break. Elias joined her 2 years later. They were buried side by side, two people who'd started as strangers in a desperate bargain and ended as partners in a life neither had expected but both had earned. Their children carried the story forward. Their grandchildren taught it to their own children. Generations passed, the world changed, but the lesson remained. That courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the choice to act despite it. That justice matters. That individuals can make a difference. That a widow nobody believed in can become a woman nobody could break. Years later, long after everyone who'd known Clara personally had died, a historian researching criminal organizations in the 1870s, Frontier discovered old court documents in a Nebraska archive. Among them was a marriage certificate dated October 1875, recording the union of Clara Whitlock and Elias Crowe under Territorial Statute 47, Section 12. Attached to it was a note in Judge Carver's handwriting, believed to be the widow from Sarah Chen's account. If true, this is where it started. The historian published her findings, connecting the real people to the famous story. News articles appeared. Scholars debated historical accuracy. Clara's farm was designated a historical site. But by then, the details didn't matter. The specific names and dates and locations had faded into the larger truth of what Clara represented. Proof that power isn't permanent, that justice is possible, that one person's refusal to surrender can change everything. Her story lived on, told and retold, adapted and embellished, becoming myth and legend and lesson. A reminder that the world is shaped not just by presidents and generals and wealthy industrialists, but by ordinary people making extraordinary choices in impossible circumstances, by widows who refuse to break, by farmers who gather evidence knowing it might kill them, by investigators who fight corruption even when the system turns against them, by journalists who tell uncomfortable truths regardless of consequences, by all the people throughout history who've stood at crossroads between surrender and resistance and chosen resistance, even when the odds were impossibly long and the cost was terrifyingly high. That's the real legacy. Not the destruction of one criminal empire, but the proof that destruction was possible. Not the survival of one woman, but the inspiration her survival provided to countless others facing their own impossible choices. Clara Whitlock started as a widow being humiliated in a courthouse. She became a legend. But more importantly, she became evidence that legends are made by real people with real fears who do hard things anyway. And that's a story worth remembering.